Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Terry McAdams. The main character in today's story is Terry McAdams, a vibrant and active 22-year-old from Arlington, Texas. Since her teenage years, she enjoyed driving around the neighborhoods in her convertible. She often spent time in the city with friends, listening to music. Terry was a bright and popular cheerleader who always drew attention but remained modest and well-mannered. She deeply loved her sisters, Hopper and Pamela, and shared a close bond with all her relatives. Terry acted as a mentor for her sisters, bridging the gap between them and their mother. She enjoyed dancing with them and even taught them how to drive. Everyone who knew Terry described her as a person who loved life. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in the University of Arkansas. Before completing her degree, she decided to move to Arlington to be with her fiancé, Karen Anderson, who was a few years older and had already graduated. After graduation, she planned to start a career and marry Karen, who proposed to her. Since 1984, local newspapers have been reporting on the murders in the Fort Worth area. During this time, Terry was studying at university and took the threat very seriously. She was genuinely afraid for her life, a concern she shared frequently with Karen and family. To protect herself, Terry made several significant changes. She quit her well-paying job in Irving, where she had to drive every day and return home in the dark. Understanding the potential danger, she decided it wasn't worth the risk of driving at night. Despite being young and energetic, Terry began to live a very cautious lifestyle. She stopped going out at night, avoided parties, and only left her home during the day when accompanied by Karen. She even felt anxious about going grocery shopping and often called her mother multiple times a day to express her fears. Terry was genuinely worried about the situation, especially since the authorities had not yet identified the criminal, leaving the streets of Arlington feeling unsafe. Around the same time, Texas police bodies formed a task force consisting of experienced experts to look into a series of violent crimes and prevent further massacres. They believed that a serial killer, or potentially multiple terrorists, were active in the area. Terry felt particularly anxious because she fit the profile of the victims. They were all attractive, around her age, and lived nearby. It was difficult for her to cope, but Karen provided strong support. She admitted to her mother and sisters that being alone was the most frightening part. To help her feel safer, Karen decided to leave his job and accept a new high-paying position closer to home, though it occasionally required business trips to nearby cities. During her moments of panic, she limited her outings and rushed home after school. For any important tasks, she aimed to handle them early in the morning and always sought someone to accompany her. On the morning of February 13, 1985, the local police station received a disturbing call. An employee responsible for technical maintenance at the residential complex where Terry lived reported that he was unable to gain access to the apartment. When the police arrived, no one answered the door, and they were unable to reach the Terry's relatives. As a result, they decided to speak with local residents. Neighbors confirmed the repairman's account. They also could not contact Terry but reported hearing suspicious noises coming from her apartment. The police then decided to break down the door to enter her apartment. Inside, they discovered a gruesome scene. Terry's body was found in the bedroom on the bed. Terry had been raped and brutally beaten with a blunt object. Based on the condition of her body and the blood evidence, it seemed the crime took place at night or early in the morning before the police were called. Forensic experts quickly arrived at the scene to begin their investigation. It was clear that there had been a struggle and Terry had fought back. They found numerous defensive wounds on her arms and upper body, and her face was severely disfigured from a prolonged beating. There were signs of strangulation on her neck, but the forensic expert believes the attacker did not kill her that way. Instead, she died from a severe head injury. She also suffered brutal rape, but it is unclear whether this occurred before or after her murder. DNA traces were found on her bed linen and underwear, but at that time, it was not possible to identify the owner. The analysis methods were still developing and could not be used in the investigation. Additionally, there were no surveillance cameras or geolocation tracking available. The situation became more complicated when local people learned about the tragedy and needed psychological support. The robbery theory was quickly dismissed as many valuables were still intact in the apartment, including conspicuous items. It was clear that robbery was not the motive. The police began interviewing Terry's friends and relatives, looking for people who might have had personal motives such as jealousy, hatred, or revenge. However, Terry McAdams was known to be very kind, friendly, and non-confrontational, and none of her relatives could think of anyone who would want to harm her. Police searched the crime scene but did not find the murder weapon, which forensic experts believe was a hammer or a similar metal tool. They did discover a cigarette butt in the apartment, indicating it likely belonged to the killer. Unfortunately, the technology available at the time was insufficient to extract DNA from the cigarette, and the saliva remnants were too small to analyze. The only useful information obtained was the brand of cigarettes the killer used. One theory being considered is that a serial killer may be responsible for the crimes. Police have looked into Terry's murder and other cases in the nearby area and believe the suspect may not have known the victims, and the attacks appear to have occurred spontaneously. The attacker aimed to avoid detection and leave no evidence behind. So he chose to enter through the back sliding balcony door instead of the main entrance. There were no clear signs of a break-in on the outer window frame. It is probable that he used a tree, growing a few meters away from the apartment building's wall, to reach the balcony. Unfortunately, aside from these basic observations, police were unable to gather any useful information. Police spoke with the family of the Terry, particularly her mother and sisters, who had the closest bond with her. They were all understandably shocked by the tragedy. Terry, known for her cheerful demeanor, seemed incapable of having enemies, especially ones who would wish to harm her so cruelly. Disturbingly, it appeared that Terry had a sense of impending danger. She was afraid to leave her home, fearing she could become a victim. Tragically, she was killed in her own apartment. As news of the attack spread throughout the city, the local community began to believe that there was a killer on the loose, capable of breaking into any apartment. They suspected that he might have targeted attractive women, stalked them, and attacked them. Ultimately, the community felt that no one was safe, especially young women who might be the next targets. Residents decided to take matters into their own hands. Over the next few months, gun and ammunition sales skyrocketed as more people began arming themselves. Meanwhile, public pressure began to mount on the police for answers. The county sheriff appeared on a local television station, asking anyone with information about the crime to come forward. After Terry's murder was reported on the local news, police received numerous calls, but the information did not help the investigation. Initially, Terry's fiancée Karen was considered the prime suspect, but he was away on business at the time and had an alibi. The police tried to include him in the murder profile to close the case and appease public concern, but this was not possible. Terry's friends could not believe that he could commit such a crime. After his alibi of being away on business was confirmed, he was removed from the suspect list. Police spoke with Terry's relatives to reconstruct a timeline of events that took place on February 12th. Terry arrived at school around 4 p.m. After leaving the university, she got into her car and drove home. Once home, she changed clothes and went shopping, again alone. Although she usually liked to invite her friends along, they were all busy that day. First, she went to the nearest grocery store to buy ingredients for a cake she planned to make for Karen to celebrate Valentine's Day. He was scheduled to return from a business trip the next morning. Store employees confirmed that they saw Terry at the checkout and even provided a receipt for her purchase. The receipt confirmed that she had purchased ingredients for baking. They determined that she left the store at around 6:30 p.m. Police questioned anyone who may have seen her at the time, looking for any suspicious behavior, such as someone following her. However, no one reported anything unusual. It appeared to be a routine shopping trip. Terry paid for her items and walked out. Terry went home and decided not to go out again, as she had scheduled a visit from a repairman the next morning to fix some wiring issues. That evening, none of the neighbors were home, and those who did hear strange noises were unable to fully grasp the seriousness of the situation. The sounds faded relatively quickly, leading people to calm down. Typically, police would look for the killer among the victim's close acquaintances. However, this time it wasn't the case. A few months ago, Terry was preparing for her wedding. Karen had given her a $5,000 engagement ring, but the police were unable to find the ring during their investigation. Initially, it was thought that the ring's disappearance could be a robbery gone wrong. However, further investigation revealed that this theory was unlikely, as nothing else was missing. Given its value, a campaign was launched to find the ring. Approximately 250 flyers with a picture of the ring were distributed to local pawn shops, including those in Fort Worth and Dallas, informing them of the missing jewelry. Despite this effort, no one reported the ring to the police. The police followed up on all potential leads, but none of them came to fruition. All of the suspects questioned provided alibis. The police focused on people with a history of violence who lived in the area. However, the investigation began to stall. Terry's relatives made efforts to promote the case. They regularly reached out to the public through various media channels. They appeared on TV and radio and distributed many flyers, but their efforts yielded no results. Eventually, the murder of Terry McAdams became an unsolved case that was filed in the archives. The Terry's family continued to seek justice, but the police lacked the necessary resources and evidence to advance the investigation. The case went cold for 36 years until 2021, when a team of experienced police and forensic experts was assembled to revisit forgotten cases. Utilizing new technologies. Among these cases is that of Terry McAdams. Police used advanced DNA testing methods, allowing them to re-examine old evidence. Biological material from the perpetrator was found on Terry's underwear and bed sheets. She fought back during the attack, leaving traces of the perpetrator's skin under her fingernails. A cigarette was taken from the archives and sent for testing because the killer's saliva might be on it. This thorough analysis helped create a profile of a likely suspect. However, when this profile was checked against the database of known offenders, there were no matches. Terry's family hoped to find the killer who had been on the run for decades. Unfortunately, despite their hopes, the case remained unsolved for many more years. Fortunately, the investigation continued and eventually decided to use a new method, genetic genealogy technology, which required the assistance of the FBI. In August 2023, after exploring all possible options, the police department reached out to the Federal Bureau of Investigations in Dallas for help with the Terry McAdams case. They planned to analyze the DNA samples collected from the crime scene and the victim's body. This genetic testing aimed to create a family tree of the suspect, allowing the investigation to extend beyond the existing database, which only included known offenders. By using genealogical research, police could significantly increase the chances of identifying the suspect's relatives, particularly close ones. This method is considered very effective. At the time this study was conducted, the database had grown to the point where the probability of finding a match was close to 100%. The investigation was successful in identifying a man named Bernard Sharp, an American who had a notable history with the police in the 1980s. At the time of the crime, Bernard was 30 years old and married. He was also a neighbor of Terry, and Karen had a close relationship with him. During the investigation following the arrest, Bernard contacted the police and supported the victim's family. He provided an alibi that the police initially found suspicious, however. His wife later confirmed his alibi, leading to him being cleared of suspicion. Ultimately, all suspicions against him were cleared and the investigation continued without results. On the evening of November 3, 1985, a man called the police, claiming to be Bernard's wife's brother. He reported that he had been shot and needed assistance. After investigating, the police discovered that an armed criminal had attacked him, his sister, and her friend at their home. When the police arrived at the scene, it appeared to be a horrific massacre. He recounted that when he returned home with his sister and her friend, he found Bernard waiting for them with a gun. Bernard opened fire, killing the two women on the spot and wounding Bernard's wife's brother. Bernard's wife's brother was injured in the shooting but escaped to a neighbor's house. His injuries were not life-threatening. Bernard may not have expected his wife's brother to be there, and the shooting may have been premeditated. When Bernard realized his plan had failed, he began shooting at people. In addition to the two dead women, Bernard's wife's brother was also found wounded at the scene. Bernard was shot in the head and died from his injuries on November 3, 2008. Probably, the decision to voluntarily end his life was a factor in the tragic events that unfolded. It is now clear why the attacks on young girls in the city stopped after this tragedy. Bernard was a serial killer. During the investigation, no witnesses came forward to confirm his plans or his connection to the murders of Terry and the other girls. However, several close friends of Bernard's reported that he knew Terry's killer but did not name him. Several months after Terry's murder, Bernard was found dead after killing his wife and her friend, and seriously injuring his wife's brother. Police were unable to locate his body for an autopsy, so they had to take other measures to determine his connection to the murder of Terry McAdams. Police traveled out of state to meet with one of Bernard's registered relatives. Although the man did not want his name linked to the crime, he eventually agreed to provide a DNA sample. Forensic genealogy helped confirm Bernard's guilt. At the time of Bernard's death, police were unable to compare his DNA with the DNA found at the crime scene. They were unable to establish a connection between his previous attacks. Before killing his relatives, Bernard had only used violence and had not used a gun. Furthermore, Bernard's fingerprints were not in the police database, meaning that no matches could be found. Given the nature of the attacks, police suspect he may have been involved in other crimes in his neighborhood. He appears to fit the profile of a serial rapist and murderer. Bernard's criminal record has been turned over to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, an agency known for its crime-solving abilities. However, there has been no confirmed evidence of his involvement in any other cases. For Terry's family, identifying the killer brought them relief. After 39 years, the case was finally closed. This breakthrough was made possible by new technology. Terry's sisters appeared on a local television channel and shared their feelings about the case being solved through several interviews. After nearly 40 years, they say it would have been better to see justice in person. However, they take comfort in knowing that this dangerous criminal stopped his criminal ways long ago and cannot harm anyone again. If he had not stopped, many more innocent women could have been victimized by him over the years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Chloe and Aubrey Berry. Wack-BJ is a small coastal settlement in Canada with a population of under 20,000 people. It is an ideal place for starting a family with a united, quiet, safe, but still well-developed community. On December 25, 2017, the town was alive with the Christmas spirit. The windows of the apartments along the street sparkled with colorful lights, and homes were beautifully decorated. However, the festive atmosphere was disrupted by the flashing lights of police cars responding to a tragic incident. Sarah worked for the local ferry service, which connected the mainland with coastal areas and several nearby islands for communication and cargo deliveries. She studied at the University of Victoria and completed an internship for this position. Prior to this, she worked in the public relations group. She was active and energetic in everything she pursued, which brought her success. Her relationship with Andrew blossomed quickly after they met, and they soon took their relationship to the next level. They got married and started a family, welcoming their daughter Chloe in 2013. 2 years later, they gave birth to their second daughter, Aubrey. At the beginning of their relationship, the love of young couple Sarah and Andrew seemed sincere and sweet. However, the pressures of daily life began to take a toll on their bond. After the family has children, their relationship deteriorated significantly. To make matters worse, Sarah faced the heartbreak of losing her father in a car accident. All of these things caused Andrew's behavior to change a lot. He became anxious, prone to outbursts over minor issues, and often directed verbal insults at Sarah. It was clear that Sarah's father had previously helped control Andrew's temper, but now that support was gone. As a consequence, Andrew's aggressiveness increased. Initially, Sarah attempted to resolve conflicts and kept their issues private, hoping this tough time would pass. Unfortunately, matters only worsened. During a tense argument over custody of her two daughters, Aubrey and Chloe, Andrew made serious threats, claiming that he would harm the entire family if the situation did not change. Sarah was deeply troubled by these threats, and Andrew's anger became increasingly uncontrollable. Andrew's behavior became erratic and dangerous. When he got angry, he drove recklessly, creating hazardous situations on the road. At first, he tried not to act like that when his daughter was there, but he eventually lost control and engaged in these antics even with the daughter in the car. It is clear that this marriage was once a happy one, but now it has become seriously dangerous for Sarah and her daughter, who were growing up in a hostile and unsafe environment. Despite this, Sarah made efforts to maintain the marriage. Months went by until Sarah reached her breaking point. She decided to end the relationship and told Andrew directly that he needed to move out that day. Instead of leaving calmly, Andrew has sparked another debate, barging into his wife's bedroom and trying to strangle her. Sarah managed to escape, grabbed her phone, and called the police. Andrew continued his aggressive behavior until the police arrived, clearly displaying his violent nature. He was quickly arrested and taken to the police station. After this episode, Sarah obtained a restraining order, preventing Andrew from approaching her or their children. This brought a sense of relief to the family, as Andrew was now under control. He moved into his own apartment and lived alone, while Sarah took care of their two daughters. She worked hard and often worked overtime to earn money to raise her children. Meanwhile, her mother also helps take care of the children while she is at work. During this time, Sarah and Andrew finalized their divorce, and Sarah was awarded full custody of their children. Because of his aggressive behavior, Andrew lost his visitation rights and was ordered to pay alimony. For 3 months, Sarah focused entirely on her daughters, giving them her love and attention. However, everything shifted when Andrew returned, saying he missed his daughters and wanted to meet with them. Sarah refused his request, and he was unable to see the children. At that point, Andrew seemed to have changed. With the help of a lawyer and witness testimonies, he wanted to protest the court's decision to grant custody of the child. Amendments were made to the court order, allowing him to see his daughters on weekends. He was proud that he now had official permission to meet with them. Sarah was responsible for bringing the girls Aubrey and Chloe to meet their father, Andrew, and she made sure to supervise their visits. During these times, Andrew was able to connect well with his daughters. Unfortunately, this was just the start of a tragedy. A few years later, issues arose concerning alimony and the shared ownership of the house. The court ordered Andrew to pay a large amount in alimony. Meanwhile, there were ongoing discussions about how to divide the jointly owned house for the benefit of their children. Andrew, the young father, refused to contribute any money towards the house. Consequently, the court allowed Sarah to buy Andrew's share of the property, valued at $60,000, for only $20,000, after deducting the alimony debt. The agreement means that Sarah will have full ownership of the house and will no longer be able to claim maintenance payments. Sarah accepted these terms. However, Andrew opposed this arrangement and sought to contest the court's decision. During this time, he frequently took their daughters to spend time, as the court permitted him to do so without the presence of their mother or any guardianship authorities. Soon, Sarah began to notice increasingly concerning signs regarding her children. After Andrew returning them one day, she discovered a bruise-like mark on Aubrey's head. When she called Andrew, he explained that Aubrey had accidentally hit herself while playing. However, during a later conversation, Aubrey revealed that Andrew had attempted to touch her inappropriately. Andrew dismissed the accusation as absurd, but Sarah believed her daughter. Determined to protect her children, she contacted Child Protection Services. An investigation was launched, and during this time, Andrew's interactions with Chloe and Aubrey were closely monitored. Although Sarah and Aubrey expressed concerns, law enforcement and Child Protection Services found no evidence of any misconduct by Andrew, leading them to close the case. Andrew insisted that Aubrey's bruise was caused by her falling, which appeared plausible since he stated he had accidentally bumped into her during a game. Sarah argued that Andrew posed a danger to their daughters, Aubrey and Chloe. She noted that he had previously exhibited strange and suspicious behavior, and the daughters were often reluctant to spend time with him. In an effort to protect her children, Sarah attempted to restrict Andrew's visits. In late 2016, she once again questioned his ability to care for them after he left Aubrey alone in a stroller in a public area while he walked away. Furthermore, Sarah claimed that Andrew spoke badly about her in front of the children, which she thought was his way of trying to turn them against her. During the trial, Sarah and Andrew shared their accounts of the incident and presented their arguments. Ultimately, the situation remained unchanged. Aubrey and Chloe continued to live with Sarah, while Andrew was allowed to take them on holidays and weekends. The judge viewed Andrew as a caring father capable who could provide well for his daughters. The court concluded that Andrew's aggressive behavior was only temporary and linked to domestic issues, with no evidence of child abuse presented. Andrew was given another chance, and both he and Sarah received decisions that they must comply with so they can continue to communicate with 6-year-old daughter Chloe and 4-year-old daughter Aubrey. Chloe and Aubrey were bright, cheerful children with distinct personalities and interests. Chloe had just begun first grade at a local school, where she discovered her passion for horse riding, a skill her cousin had been teaching her since she was young. She also had a talent for art. Meanwhile, Aubrey was getting ready to start school. The sisters were full of energy and creativity, and they shared a close bond and a love for artistic activities. During the court hearings, the guardianship service assessed Sarah, the girl's mother, and found her to be an excellent parent. She worked hard to maintain a good relationship with her daughters, both during their time as a family and after the divorce. The judge required both Sarah and Andrew to complete special training courses, and Andrew was actively involved in the process. Unfortunately, this wasn't enough to prevent a tragic outcome. According to the custody agreement, Aubrey and Chloe were scheduled to spend Christmas 2017 with their father, Andrew. They celebrated Sarah's birthday on December 21st at morning with the children, and then Sarah took Chloe and Aubrey to Andrew's apartment on Beach Drive. Andrew lived just steps from the marina, in an upscale part of the city with a view of the Pacific coast. However, he is facing many great difficulties, including a financial crisis. He had quit his job, lost his main source of income, and developed a gambling addiction. As a result, he was unable to pay alimony or even provide basic necessities for himself and the children. From the beginning, Sarah believed it was a mistake to take Aubrey and Chloe to see Andrew. A court order obligated her to do so, and failing to comply could lead to serious repercussions for her. Sarah was especially hesitant to let Aubrey and Chloe spend the Christmas holidays with him, as she felt it was unfair, but she felt she had no alternative. Sarah asked Andrew to leave the children with her for her birthday, but he immediately threatened to sue, so she was forced to comply. As Sarah approached Andrew's apartment, her anxiety intensified. She noticed from a distance that the lights in the windows were off. For several weeks, Aubrey and Chloe had shared that during their visits with Andrew, they enjoyed using flashlights as if they were camping, which they found entertaining. Sarah was aware that Andrew had left his job in May and are having a lot of financial difficulties, which might explain why the electricity had been cut off. To avoid making the situation more tense and affect the children's vacation, she decided not to talk about the issue with Andrew and the children right away. However, she planned to address it later, as she was looking for ways to restrict Andrew meet to Aubrey and Chloe. When saying goodbye to Aubrey and Chloe, Sarah was understood that they would stay with Andrew until noon on December 25th, after which he was expected to return them. Upon returning home, Sarah noticed that Chloe had forgotten her favorite stuffed toy. She took the toy and brought it to Chloe. When she knocked on the window of Andrew's apartment, both Aubrey and Chloe appeared at the blinds in their holiday outfits, smiling and looking happy. This made Sarah feel a bit more at ease. She gave the daughters the toy and left, anticipating that she would see them again in a few days. On Christmas morning, Sarah woke up in a surprisingly quiet house and began her usual chores to pass the time until Aubrey and Chloe returned. During this time, she cleaned the house, decorated for the holiday, and placed presents under the tree, all in an effort to make the daughters happy. By 2 p.m., Sarah's parents arrived, but she was starting to worry because Aubrey and Chloe had not yet returned from Andrew's house. Andrew was supposed to return Aubrey and Chloe by noon, but Sarah had called and texted him several times without getting a response. She then tried to contact Andrew's sister, but she also ignored Sarah's calls and messages. Growing more worried, Sarah decided to go look for the children with her mother, leaving her father at home in case Andrew arrived with the daughters. When Sarah and her mother arrived at Andrew's apartment, Aubrey and Chloe were no longer at the window. Inside, the place felt eerily quiet and empty. Sarah couldn't see what was happening through the blinds. She knocked and shouted at the window, but there was no response, which only increased her fear. In desperation, they decided to speak with the neighbors. One neighbor mentioned that he had heard the children talking early in the morning and, closer to midday, he heard loud noises coming from the apartment. Initially, he thought nothing of it, but now it seemed suspicious. He also noted that he hadn't seen any strangers near the building. Alarmed, Sarah and her mother quickly contacted the police to report Aubrey and Chloe's disappearance. When the first police officer arrived at the scene, he attempted to contact Andrew, the apartment's owner, but received no answer, just as no one responded to Sarah's screams. The officer then tried to open the door and discovered it was not locked. Inside, the lights were off, and flipping the switch had no effect. It became clear that Andrew's electricity and water had been cut off due to unpaid utility bills, and he was facing eviction. Using a flashlight, the officer was met with a shocking sight that resembled a horror movie scene. Blood was splattered everywhere, including the ceiling, prompting him to immediately call for backup. The police officers cautiously, weapons drawn, aware that the killer responsible for the horrific massacre might still be inside. They followed a bloody footprint to the bathroom, where they discovered Andrew, who was naked and severely injured with multiple wounds to his chest. He was still breathing, but each breath seemed increasingly difficult. In the next room, they found Chloe on the bed. She was already dead. Her body showed numerous cuts and bruises, indicating she had been beaten with a blunt object. Nearby, a bloody baseball bat lay on the floor among her clothes. Aubrey was found in a similar state as Chloe, dressed in blood-soaked pajamas, with splatters even on the ceiling. Both children, Aubrey and Chloe, had suffered multiple lacerations and stab wounds, similar to those found on their father, Andrew. The police checked Aubrey and Chloe's pulses several times, but they were confirmed dead. An ambulance quickly arrived to assist Andrew. Due to the cramped space in the bathroom, he was placed on a stretcher and prepared to be carried out of the apartment. At that moment, he regained consciousness, looked at the medics, and simply asked them to end his life. Andrew was taken to hospital with other police officers, and they hoped to question him once his health has stabilized. Meanwhile, they informed Sarah that both of her daughters, Aubrey and Chloe, were dead. Overcome with grief, she screamed hysterically and desperately tried to enter the apartment. Sarah had many questions, and so did the investigators, about the brutal murders of her two young children on Christmas Day. She believed she knew the answer: their father had killed them. Given the severity of the injuries, Andrew quickly became the primary suspect. Sarah warned that he was a danger to himself and Aubrey and Chloe due to the nature of the wounds. The police thought he might be more willing to talk while in the hospital, as they often obtain truthful confessions in such situations. Therefore, they wanted to interview Andrew to uncover what had happened to the children and to him. The police suspected Andrew had harmed Aubrey and Chloe, defenseless children, and after realizing the gravity of his actions, he might have attempted to end his life. Aubrey and Chloe's bodies were so severely damaged that the expert believed he first killed Chloe, then he killed Aubrey. Chloe suffered multiple severe head injuries from a baseball bat, which led to a fractured skull. Additionally, she had 26 stab wounds. Some of her wounds were inflicted before her death, while others occurred posthumously. The cause of death was identified as blood loss. Aubrey's situation was tragically severe. She had 32 stab wounds, leading to fatal blood loss. The medical examiner determined that the attacker had flipped the children over twice to stab them in both the front and back. He appeared to be enraged and intended to ensure that the girls would not survive Christmas. Meanwhile, forensic investigators thoroughly examined the apartment and discovered men's jeans and a blood-soaked t-shirt, both belonging to Andrew. A knife, clearly the murder weapon, was also located at the scene. The amount of blood in the apartment was so much that a team of experts was called in to assist in the investigation. Experts discovered many signs that there were efforts to clean up the scene, including fingerprints on the knife and patterned socks. Blood traces were even found in the refrigerator, indicating that the perpetrator had rummaged through it after the attack. In one of the rooms, a note addressed to his sister was found. In this note, Andrew expressed a long list of disappointments about his difficulties with Sarah, and felt misunderstood by the woman he loved deeply. He conveyed a sense of betrayal and recounted the many struggles he faced during his marriage and after his divorce. According to his confession, the only source of happiness in his life was his children, which led him to decide to end their lives together. It was clearly a suicide note. After investigating the crime scene, the police concluded that Andrew had attacked and brutally killed his children, Aubrey, 4 years old, and Chloe, 6 years old. Following the incident, he entered the bathroom and attempted to harm himself, believing these injuries would also result in his death. However, doctors assessed that none of his self-inflicted wounds were life-threatening, so he survived. Andrew soon regained his composure and was placed under medical supervision, where he admitted to self-harm. After receiving treatment, he was arrested and charged with double murder. When Andrew was taken to the police station, Sarah was already there with her parents. The police believed that Andrew had harmed the children, and he confessed to his actions, which caused Sarah to burst into tears. She had to be taken away from the station because she was inconsolable. It is hard to imagine her despair and grief, especially since she had tried desperately to protect her daughters from their father. Despite filing complaints with Child Protection Services and taking legal action, Sarah could not provide evidence to prove that Andrew was a danger, and her claims were not believed. Tragically, her daughters were killed by their father. The case received widespread attention and many people held memorial services to honor Aubrey and Chloe, innocent girls who suffered. The public was outraged by Andrew's actions and expressed support for Sarah. This incident sparked a worldwide reevaluation of the child protection system and raised questions about the judge who deemed Andrew a father thoughtful and loving to his children. The judge's decision granted Andrew unsupervised access to Aubrey and Chloe, which ultimately resulted in their deaths. However, no disciplinary actions were taken against the judge or the Child Protection Service. The victims of the tragic massacre, Aubrey and Chloe, were cremated. During the investigation, the complicated relationship between Andrew and Sarah came to light. Andrew is having a lot of trouble with his finances. He left his job in May 2017 and had already begun having trouble keeping up with his rent and utility bills, leading to his electricity being cut off. His financial problems were largely fueled by his gambling addiction. Although Andrew earned a decent wage of around $200 per shift, but during this time, he became addicted to playing cards. He attempted to recover his losses, but things only worsened. He started borrowing money from anyone who would lend it to him. His gambling addiction spiraled out of control, with his gambling expenses reaching about $3,000 each month. In the fall of 2015, Andrew won a big amount of $100,000, but feeling overconfident, he quickly lost it all. In an attempt to win back his losses, he borrowed $10,000 from a man named Paul. Desperate to repay this loan, he continued to take out additional loans, while losing interest in his job, eventually quitting. By spring 2017, he was in deep financial trouble, owing approximately $225,000, with all his credit limits maxed out. Andrew was in a desperate situation, even thinking about withdrawing his savings from a pension fund. He couldn't afford to buy food and had to ask his neighbors for help to feed his daughters during their visit. His life was filled with ongoing tragedy. During the investigation, police found disturbing search queries in his internet history. About a month before the double murder, he had been searching for ways to end his own life. His problems grew worse, and on Christmas Day, he made a tragic decision. He used a brutal method to kill his daughters, doing this act coldly and mercilessly, which makes people doubt his love for them. On January 16th, the hearings for the double murder case began. The prosecutor presented detailed information to the jury about Andrew's relationship and life circumstances just before the crime occurred. The prosecution argued that Andrew willingly put himself in this situation because he could not overcome his gambling addiction. They described his actions as premeditated, using evidence like his internet browsing history to support their argument. In contrast, the defense attorney highlighted flaws in the investigation, pointing out that a patrolman had left the scene while waiting for backup, which left the situation inside unclear. The lawyer argued that Andrew and his children were victims of a killer seeking revenge for Andrew's debts after the officer had left the scene. This allowed the real perpetrator to escape through the fire exit. However, the prosecution rejected these things because the scene was under constant surveillance. There were no signs of a break-in, and the attacker could not have quietly exited the scene without being seen by the police officer. Furthermore, statement of the defense contradicted Andrew's confession made at the hospital. During his hospital stay, he even asked the medical staff to help him die, indicating that he had inflicted injuries on himself and wanted to end his life. It is clear from Andrew's suicide note that he intended to end his life and harm the daughters so that they would be with him in death. However, the lawyer maintained that the family could have been victims of a stranger, a killer who unexpectedly found Andrew and the children in the apartment. Alternatively, they could have all been random victims of a maniac. On April 25, 2017, a woman was attacked and stabbed near Andrew's house, but the police could not identify her attacker. The defense suggested that the same person could be responsible for both this attack and the murder of Andrew's children, who remains at large. However, the details of the wounds and the circumstances of each incident were different, indicating Andrew's guilt. During the presentation of the crime scene and evidence related to the murders of Aubrey and Chloe, Andrew started to cry. The prosecutor asserted that their father, Andrew, was responsible for the murders. One key piece of evidence was blood on the floor that matched Andrew's. If the attacker had been a stranger, they would probably have worn shoes typically found in a home. However, the shoes Andrew was wearing when he was arrested matched those discovered at the crime scene. Also, the forensic expert pointed out that the injuries on Andrew and the daughters were the same. Andrew acknowledged that he had inflicted wounds on himself, and similar cuts were found on the children, indicating that the same person used the same weapon. At trial, the defense attorney argued that Sarah had put pressure on Andrew, leading to the possibility of him acting aggressively. They believe Sarah is the main cause of Andrew's unstable mental health. In response, Sarah countered these claims, saying that Andrew had been aggressive for a long time, which led to their divorce. She was only trying to protect her children from a dangerous and unpredictable situation, which is why she filed complaints with various authorities, all of which were ignored. Sarah was concerned about the safety of her daughters during visits. Recently, Andrew appeared to have changed for the better, but no one realized this was just his cover. The defense continued to argue for Andrew's innocence, portraying him as a victim of his circumstances. They mentioned that Andrew owed $200,000 to another man. Andrew claimed he couldn't pay his debts, which led to him being forced to keep a suspicious bag in his apartment, the contents of which he was unaware of. Various individuals resembling criminals would periodically come to collect it, and Andrew had given them a spare key. According to the lawyers, one of these individuals committed a violent act in the apartment. The prosecution questioned Andrew about why the attacker would kill Aubrey and Chloe in his apartment while he was there. Andrew claimed that he lost consciousness after being struck, and when he regained it, he found Aubrey and Chloe unresponsive. The attacker was still in the apartment, but due to the darkness, Andrew couldn't see his face clearly. However, he noted that the assailant was a dark-skinned man with dark hair. The attacker then ran into the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and tug of war, during which Andrew was struck multiple times and lost consciousness again. A mysterious bag was discovered during the investigation, but no evidence of any intruder was found, including DNA or fingerprints. The prosecution argued that Andrew's primary motive for the murders was financial distress. He was struggling to cope with life, unable to pay his debts or child support, leading him to consider killing his children to escape these obligations. The jury deliberated for 3 days and ultimately found Andrew guilty of double second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole in 22 years. Andrew showed no emotion when the verdict was announced, shocking Sarah's family because the sentence was too light. They also found themselves unable to contest the verdict. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Gloria Pompili. Gloria Pompili was born in Frosinone, Italy, on December 18, 1993. She had a brother, and after they were born, their parents divorced. From the age of 6 to 16, Gloria was adopted by another family because her mother was very poor and could not afford to raise her. During this time, social workers closely monitored Gloria, believing she had a cognitive disorder with developmental delays. Even as an adult, she remained very naive and was easily manipulated. This naivety was evident in both her behavior and her overall perspective on life. Gloria did not receive a proper education, which later made it hard for her to find a job. As she grew up, she chose to leave the family that had adopted her and live on her own in a specialized institution. At 16, while living there, Gloria fell in love with a young man named Alex, who was about her age and of Romanian origin. They had 2 sons together, Gabriel and Emanuele. However, soon after, Alex was arrested and imprisoned for selling illegal substances. As a result, Gloria became a single mother, faced difficulties from society and shouldered the responsibility of raising her 2 young children on her own. Gloria tried her best to be a good mother despite facing difficult circumstances. Without a full-time job, she relied on her mother, Carmela, for support. Carmela's help allowed their small family to find stability with a modest income. Carmela worked as a cleaner at a local hotel, and together, they managed to handle their challenges. Things seemed to get better, especially when the children's father, Alex, was released from prison. However, Alex did not want to rekindle his relationship with Gloria, and instead quickly found a new girlfriend. Despite this, he maintained a good relationship with his children and occasionally helped them financially. At the end of 2015, Gloria went on an errand and unexpectedly met her aunt, Lloyd Dupreet, at the post office. After hearing about Gloria's struggles, Lloyd offered her a job as a saleswoman in a flower shop. Gloria was having difficulty finding work at the time, so this unexpected offer excited her. Trusting her aunt and believing she genuinely wanted to help, Gloria discussed the plan with her mother, Carmela. However, Carmela was not pleased with the proposal because she did not trust Lloyd and found the sudden offer suspicious. Despite Carmela's concerns, Lloyd and Gloria were able to persuade Carmela to agree to the plan. Lloyd thoroughly explained the job details, giving the impression that she genuinely wanted to help them during a tough time, while also finding a reliable worker for the shop. Gloria eagerly accepted her aunt's offer, oblivious to any potential risks. Unknown to Gloria, Lloyd was dating an Egyptian man named Saad Mohammed Alesh Salem. Saad was a legal migrant, but his brother Hadi was not. Lloyd devised a plan to help Hadi get a residence permit by arranging for Hadi to marry Gloria. Lloyd believed this would eventually lead to Hadi gaining citizenship. To facilitate this, she and Saad moved closer to the Gloria family. Lloyd offered Gloria a job to involve her more in their plan. Unaware of their real intentions, Gloria was captivated by Hadi when they met. Thinking she had finally found happiness, she agreed to marry him, not realizing the deceit behind their motives. Gloria's marriage to Hadi was arranged not out of love, but so Hadi could gain residency. They celebrated with Lloyd and Saad, but Gloria's happiness didn't last. After a brief celebration, they returned to Lloyd's house, an old building without heating. Gloria and her children had to leave their comfortable home and move into the tiniest room in a new apartment. Her Aunt Lloyd had promised Gloria a better life, including a potential job, but it became clear this was a deception. Lloyd never intended to help Gloria find work, and her delays only added to Gloria's hardship. In the months that followed, Gloria's living situation only worsened. Hadi quickly abandoned her, claiming he had found work in a nearby city. Gloria was left to care for her children alone, trapped in a cold and cramped room. Her aunt's Lloyd's empty promises had turned her life into a nightmare, one that would last for a year and a half. The apartment belonged to Lloyd, and she demanded that Gloria pay the rent. However, Gloria was unemployed and couldn't afford to pay. The family had no money, but Lloyd used another tactic to exert pressure. She criticized Gloria for being a bad mother. She threatened that if Gloria went to the police, her children would be taken away, just like Gloria was removed from her own mother. This threat deeply affected Gloria and left her feeling intimidated, though she hoped for a better outcome. Lloyd and Saad continued to insist Gloria pay for her stay, but she remained unable to settle the debt. They proposed a drastic way for her to earn money to cover her expenses, trading her own body. Gloria refused and begged to be allowed to go home. In response, Saad showed extreme anger and brutality. He regularly beat Gloria, and her children also suffered. On one occasion, he even threw stones at her son, leaving him with serious injuries. Gloria was locked in a room with her children, unable to escape. In order to be able to collect rent from Gloria, Lloyd and Saad pressured she to start servicing men, suggesting the room she shared with her children would be suitable for this purpose. Gloria refused once more. In response, they beat her and issued threats, but that doesn't work either. Too angry, Saad took Gloria's children, placed them in a wicker basket, tied a rope to it, and hung it precariously, threatening their safety. Fearing for her children's lives, Gloria is forced to comply with Saad and Lloyd's demands, and men begin to seek her out. Whenever she tried to refuse serving men, Saad and Lloyd abused her children again, and the beatings continued. The recent violence happened because Gloria had a low income. She had few clients, and her work generated very little money. For a long time, Gloria hoped this situation would end, and she dreamed of getting a job in a flower shop, believing it would improve her circumstances. However, she later discovered that her Aunt Lloyd did not own a flower shop. Lloyd continued to force Gloria into sex work and took every penny she earned. Even this was not enough for Lloyd. Since there weren't many clients, Lloyd made Gloria and the children beg on the streets under her supervision. All the money collected from begging was also taken by Lloyd, but this activity was too noticeable and risky, so they stopped it, and Gloria was forced to serve men again. Lloyd and Saad managed to bring more men for Gloria to serve. To cover up, Lloyd visited Gloria's mother, Carmela, and claimed that the children were fine, the family lived in another city, and Gloria was doing well at her flower shop job. This made Carmela suspicious, because she still talked to her daughter on the phone from time to time. During these calls, Gloria assured her mother that everything was fine. However, Gloria was so beaten down and scared that she lied to protect herself and the children. In their phone conversations, Gloria described her work as a salesperson. However, one thing puzzled Carmela. Gloria mentioned leaving home at 6 a.m. and returning late, which didn't match the typical hours of a flower shop. This seemed strange, but Carmela thought Gloria might be prepping and cleaning the store before and after hours, explaining the long workdays. Despite this, Carmela trusted her daughter's words. Gloria never complained to her mother or asked for her help. By this time, Gloria has served men every day, and this unfortunate house is called the Pink House, due to the color the facade is painted. For Gloria's children, the house became a haunting place of fear and suffering. Lloyd took out their anger on Gloria daily, and her children were constantly abused. This went on for months. The eldest child later remembered never feeling safe there, shuddering at every noise. Neighbors suspected what was happening, as they often heard screams and cries and saw bruises and injuries on Gloria and her children. Sometime after the events began, a neighbor contacted social workers. She reported that a family was cruelly treating their young children. Her explanations were vague, but she mentioned that the children were regularly hung in a basket from the balcony. Initially, this sounded strange and unbelievable, so the workers didn't take her claims seriously. Eventually, however, they decided to investigate. When they arrived at the address, they did see a strange basket hanging from the balcony. No one answered the door, so the employees used equipment to remove the basket from the railings. It was empty, so they concluded it was a prank and left. After these incidents, Gloria's situation deteriorated. She was beaten daily. The men, aka Gloria's clients, continued to her, and they also started taking her to a suburban highway, where she stood next to a cafe to serve cars that stopped. During this time, Carmela heard from several acquaintances that her daughter, Gloria, was not doing well. Some mentioned Gloria and the bruises on her body. However, with every phone call, Gloria insisted that everything was fine. Lloyd told Carmela what she wanted to hear, that Gloria was happy in her marriage, could finally live a quiet life, and raise children. She said that Gloria was working a lot and therefore couldn't always stay in touch. Carmela believed her again. During this period, Gloria's aunt, Lloyd, increased her control over her. Lloyd was afraid she might cheat and keep some money, so Lloyd would count the condoms and insist that she return the used ones. Gloria complied, but Lloyd always found reasons to accuse her and took all the money whenever she bought food during work. This became another reason for Lloyd to punish and beat her. In 2016, Saad went to Egypt to visit family for 45 days. While he was there, he called Lloyd multiple times, expressing anger that Gloria was resisting. Gloria resisted Lloyd's attempts to force her into serving customers. To ensure obedience, Lloyd placed the children in a basket and dangled them off the balcony, threatening to cut the rope if Gloria did not comply. Neighbors noticed chaos in the apartment Lloyd's. Everyone was aware that Lloyd forced Gloria to beg, and the constant crying of the children in her apartment caused neighbors to start speculating. However, Lloyd created a false narrative, claiming that Gloria was unable to pay rent, while in truth, she was profiting from a criminal operation. Lloyd had a feeling that something was off and was worried that the police might come to investigate. A major obstacle in exposing Saad and Lloyd's criminal scheme is Gloria's behavior. She was too trusting and frequently lied to protect Lloyd, inventing stories that everything was fine. She sometimes claimed she served men because she wanted to and occasionally complained about being forced to curl her hair. When she confessed, her words were not believed. According to Gloria, her husband threatened her with violence against her and her children. She was terrified they would kill her children in front of her. She had already seen Saad throw stones at a boy, which heightened her fear. By 2016, due to fears of exposing criminal actions, Gloria and her 2 children relocated to avoid recognition and continue their activities. They moved into another apartment owned by Lloyd, along with Saad. However, the neighbors grew suspicious and noticed unusual behavior. When they met Gloria on the street, they urged her to move out, but she insisted she had nowhere else to go and struggled to manage alone with 2 children. Some neighbors provided assistance, with one even giving Gloria a free haircut. She slowly formed a friendship with a young man named Stephanie, who found out that Gloria had not completed her education and was in urgent need of employment and money. Even though they are friends, Gloria was too scared to share the abuse she experienced from Lloyd. Later, Stephanie witnessed more distressing incidents. A neighbor confessed seeing, from their apartment window, that Saad frequently visited Gloria and Lloyd. One night, the neighbor witnessed a horrifying incident. A man attacked Gloria, hitting her multiple times and then smashing her window with his head. When a neighbor returned to cut Gloria's hair, they noticed a deep cut on her head. Despite this, Gloria insisted that everything was fine and refused to share any details out of fear. In August 2017, Gloria managed to escape, but her tormentors, Saad and Lloyd, found her the next day. Saad picked her up in a car and brought her back home, where he began yelling at her, insulting her, and hitting her from the doorway. Throughout that month, the neighbor witnessed Gloria being beaten severely every day. Fresh bruises were visible on her face, but when asked about it, Gloria lied, saying it was her own fault or that she had been in accidents. On August 23, Gloria, who was clearly exhausted, was sent out to work again. Security footage later revealed that Saad and Lloyd physically forced her into Lloyd's car. Once inside, Saad struck her 3 hard blows to the face. He initially planned to circle the car and get into the driver's seat, but unexpectedly turned back, opened the door, and hit Gloria several more times. It seemed that she had tried to resist her tormentors again, refusing to comply with them. As a result, they coerced her into submission. Gloria was taken away around 3 p.m. A few minutes later, surveillance cameras at a nearby store captured her buying a chocolate bar. This was the last sighting of her. Witnesses, including the store clerk, reported that she appeared severely beaten, but when asked what had happened, she refused to answer. Despite her injuries, Gloria refused to accept help from others and continued to work on the street until the evening. Around 7:30 p.m., Saad and Lloyd returned in a car, this time accompanied by children, and she was made to sit in the back seat. Again, they took all her earnings for the day. Saad counted the money, ignoring the amount Gloria spent at the store, and scolded her for her low earnings and unexpected expenses. This upset Saad, and he stopped the car in a dark area, pulled Gloria out, twisted her arm behind her back, and delivered several heavy blows to her stomach. These blows later turned out to be fatal. Immediately after the assault, Gloria started choking and lost consciousness, prompting her attackers, Saad and Lloyd, to attempt first aid through artificial respiration. However, their efforts were futile, and Lloyd called for emergency services. Meanwhile, Gloria's children, aged 3 and 5, were in a panic, crying for their mother. Tragically, Gloria was already beyond saving, and officials confirmed her death at the scene. The young mother Gloria was brutally killed in front of her children. Her suffering lasted over a year and a half before it finally came to an end. Afterward, Saad and Lloyd brought the children to their grandmother's house, where Gloria had lived for many years. There, they met with a social worker, and they made up a false story in an attempt to distract the police during the initial investigation. They fabricated a tale that claimed Gloria was using a banned substance and had fled, stating they found her in that condition without knowing what had happened. Eventually, law enforcement discovered the truth behind their fabricated account. The next day, Gloria's eldest child sought shelter from a social worker to request help and asked if he could share a secret. This secret appeared to be very traumatic, as the child clenched his fists in anger and helplessness, tears welling up in his eyes. He cried out that they had killed his mother, Gloria. Once he calmed down enough to speak, he told the social worker that Lloyd was actually very harmful. His face was filled with terror. After sharing a brief account, the boy stopped talking out of fear. However, his behavior was taken seriously, and his testimony was forwarded to the police, prompting a new direction in the investigation. The Carabinieri suspected that Gloria's husband, Hadi, may have been involved, suggesting that he had entered a phony marriage with Gloria's as part of a plot. Despite this, detectives found no evidence that he had treated either the children or his wife poorly. In fact, he seemed to interact well with everyone and was calm. However, after the marriage was registered, he showed little interest in the well-being of his wife and children. Hadi quickly confessed that he had used Gloria, marrying her without any intention of building a life together. Gloria's mother, Carmela, also corroborated this, stating that he had visited Gloria's with the children in the early days before the wedding. This behavior was intended to lower the Gloria family's guard while Lloyd carried out her malicious plan. Gloria's stepchildren were always friendly, but Hadi did not want to take on the role of a father to them. Ultimately, it was revealed that Hadi was not involved in the mistreatment of Gloria. However, he was aware of the terrible things happening to her but convinced the police that he could not change the situation. Hadi provided the police with a significant amount of helpful information that allowed them to piece together the difficult year and a half of suffering that Gloria endured before her death. While Hadi felt sympathy for Gloria, but he could not influence Saad's and Lloyd's actions in any way. At the slightest disagreement, they threatened to deport him back to his home country. According to Hadi, Gloria was under strict control and couldn't take any action without permission. Her tormentors, Saad and Lloyd, took all the money they could find, imprisoned her and her children, and they repeatedly abused her children to intimidate her into obeying their orders. Hadi stated that Gloria was so depressed recently that she hardly resisted or showed disobedience. Lloyd and Saad are clearly responsible for the abuse of Gloria and her children. Both have now been arrested and the investigation is ongoing. During this time, Lloyd and Saad began to give conflicting statements and blamed each other. Neither wanted to take responsibility for the horrific acts committed. Lloyd claimed that Saad did not respect women and treated them cruelly, stating that she had been a victim of his violence on multiple occasions. She recounted an incident during a trip to Egypt, where she said she fled after 15 days because she could no longer tolerate the disrespectful treatment of women in that country. However, Saad felt it was his duty to adhere to local customs, which led him to use violence and insults without hesitation. He was very strict and punished even the smallest mistakes, which caused Gloria and her children much suffering. The eldest child became so traumatized that he would urinate whenever he saw Saad, especially if he raised his voice or threatened punishment. Whenever Gloria resisted, Lloyd and Saad's anger would flare up, making him especially cruel during these times. The visible bruises on Gloria's body were a result of his abuse. Although Saad tried to blame Lloyd for the situation, Saad described Lloyd as cruel and unfeeling, claiming she enforced strict discipline on her niece, Gloria. She would punish harshly for minor infractions, whether it was due to not earning enough money for the day or even the slightest noise from the child. Saad attributed Lloyd's behavior to her Italian temperament, claiming she often raised her hands during arguments. Plus, Lloyd liked to provoke conflicts, often resorting to insults and physical force. This behavior contributed to her decision to leave Egypt, as she wanted to maintain a good reputation in front of her family. Detectives believed both Lloyd and Saad were responsible for the tragic incident that unfolded. If Lloyd was indeed a victim in her relationship with Saad, she could have sought help when he left for his homeland. Instead, she continued to harm Gloria. Saad, on the other hand, would not have returned to Lloyd if he was unhappy, yet he chose to maintain their relationship and came back to her after his trip. This suggests that both were complicit in their actions and share the blame. A few people who knew Gloria well reported that Gloria wanted to find a decent job to support herself and raise her children properly, but she was never given the opportunity. Her tormentors inflicted psychological harm on her young children. The older child, in particular, struggled with issues stemming from years of violence. The children witnessed their mother being beaten multiple times and were also subjected to regular beatings themselves. Whenever the children cried, they were punished further, with unreasonable demands for them to be silent. According to Gloria's eldest son, once when he witnessed another conflict, he became so frightened that he urinated and started crying. This infuriated Saad even more. He picked up the child and slammed him hard onto the floor. Following this incident, the child fell ill for an extended period. They simply placed him on the couch and did not seek medical attention. During the trial, Lloyd stated that Gloria, the children's mother, had been in a downward spiral and started engaging in prostitution at the age of 14. However, social workers who had been observing Gloria since her childhood contradicted this claim. They indicated that Lloyd's statements were part of a fabricated story intended to lessen her own punishment. Tragically, after a year and a half of violence, the situation culminated on August 27, 2017, when Gloria were brutally murdered in front of her children. Lloyd Delpreet Va Saad Mohammed Alesh Salem were convicted of premeditated murder and sentenced to 24 years in prison, although the prosecutor had sought a harsher penalty. On May 11, 2021, their sentence was reviewed and reduced to 20 years. The court determined that social services did not properly handle the complaints about abuse Gloria's Neighbors had reported troubling behavior, but social service workers only provided minimal assistance. Gloria's children were eventually adopted by another family, and the request for custody from their grandmother was denied. Nevertheless, Gloria's mother remains determined and continues to fight for custody of her grandchildren. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Anel Baez Alvarez. Anel Baez Alvarez was born on March 17, 1998, in Guamuchil, Sinaloa, Mexico. She was the second child of Ilda and Hugo, with an older brother named Omar. Later, the family welcomed a younger sister, Adriana. Initially, she was a shy child. She gradually became more confident, showing grace and charm. She was energetic and always tried to entertain those around her. Anel's father was a tailor, and the family was prosperous, close-knit, and happy. However, the family was no longer happy when Anel's mother was diagnosed with cancer in the early 2010s. The children had to grow up quickly to take care of her. After a tough battle with the illness, Ilda passed away in 2012. The family was devastated, but they didn't give up. They supported each other through the pain and trying to make life better. The tragedy brought the sisters, Adriana and Anel, so close that they shared everything, facing sadness and problems together. Anel remained a cheerful and friendly girl with a passion for dancing and music. As she entered high school, she became an ideal daughter, helping with household chores, caring for her younger sister, and keeping up her good grades. Cooking for the family became one of her favorite activities, especially making desserts, which became her specialty. Anel conquered her shyness and became one of the most popular girls at school. She also started a music group as a singer, where she developed a love for the ballad Amor Eterno. At the same time, Anel met someone who would become her best friend, at least for a while. Her name was Erandi Elizabeth Gutierrez. They became an inseparable duo, earning the admiration of everyone around them and being considered the most popular girls in school. They showed their friendship through social media posts. On October 14, 2012, Anel uploaded a photo with Erandi, expressing her happiness for their friendship. Anel thanked God for the chance to be close to her and even wrote that Erandi had become not just a friend, but a sister to her. Initially, everything was wonderful, but over time, the situation changed. Although they were the same age, their personalities were completely different. Anel was a sweet girl who loved love songs and spending time with her family. In contrast, Erandi lived in an vice's environment and became increasingly involved with drugs, also known in Mexico as bucona. Erandi frequently attended events featuring musicians from this culture, such as the Caliber 50 concert during the Carnival celebrations in Guamuchil in 2014. She also had a very clear political stance. Once, Erandi posted on social media that she took part in a march in support of Joaquin Guzman Lora. On her page, she wrote, "March for El Chapo's freedom. We must rally behind this great cause." This message was accompanied by a photo. Unlike Erandi, Anel usually didn't share her point of view on social media and didn't agree with the views Erandi supported. As a result, the distance between them grew. In 2014, Erandi and Anel of them started attending Guamuchil High School at the Autonomous University of Sinaloa, but they barely spoke to each other. Each found her own group of friends. Anel began spending time with Melissa, Karen, Manuel, and Maria Jose. These friends had healthy lifestyles, followed her everywhere, and admired her. Maria, who had known Anel since elementary school, saw her as the leader of the group. Anel took on this role, and she always looking out for everyone. Anel was very polite and organized. Despite growing apart from Erandi, but she never told her father or siblings about their falling out. Around the same time, Erandi started acting strangely on social media. she posted negative and concerning messages on her page. Some posts were quite alarming, such as, pregnant 13-year-old girls, 13-year-old girls taking psychoactive substances, and bizarre statements such as, her mom is upset that she killed her ex and buried him in her garden, or, it is fortunate that she is envied by the dead. The initial posts didn't make much sense, as Arandi took them from forums or songs. However, with time, some messages began to appear threatening. On February 5, 2014, she posted that she was going to bury someone by the end of the year. On February 23, she wrote that she might seem very calm, but in her head, she had killed the person at least 3 times, and every day her mind was filled with new ideas. A few days later, Arandi wrote that she thanked God no one heard her thoughts, and everything would definitely happen the next day. She kept writing more and more posts, and became very creepy. On March 3, Arandi posted, "Maybe not now and not tomorrow, but soon, she won't say anything to that person, but that person should know that she has destroyed them mentally." The last post was on March 16, where she wrote, "This really drives she to despair." No one in her circle knew who these threats were directed at. However, rumors started to spread at school. Many said that Arandi was upset with Anil because they were no longer friends. Some even accused Arandi of being jealous of Anil because everyone liked her. However, Anil wasn't worried about Arandi's social media posts. She celebrated her birthday with a big party, wearing a beautiful pink dress, and was the star of the evening. Her life seemed perfect until March 19, when her absence raised concerns in her family. Hugo received a call from Adriana's school, informing him that Anil hadn't picked her up as usual. Initially, he wasn't too concerned, thinking she might have overslept or was with friends after school. He quickly went to pick up Adriana. On the way, Hugo tried calling Anil to see if everything was fine, but she didn't answer. He assumed she was probably still sleeping. After picking up Adriana, Hugo tried to contact Anil again, but she didn't answer. He repeatedly called her number, without success, which made him more worried. Hugo headed to her house in the Los Fuentes area. When he arrived, he noticed the front door was wide open. Upon entering the living room, both he and Adriana saw that some items had been moved. They thought it might have been a robbery. After that, they shouted Anil's name and searched desperately throughout the house, but they also couldn't find her. Finally, Hugo arrived in Anil's room and found the door locked, which worried him. He knocked several times, but Anil didn't answer. In desperation, Hugo broke down the door. Inside, he was shocked to find Anil's lifeless body on the floor, covered in numerous wounds with blood stains around. He immediately called the police, who arrived quickly. Upon examining the scene, the officers initially believed that a very strong person or a group had committed the crime. Although there were some blood stains, they were minimal, suggesting the attacker had attempted to clean them up. During the autopsy, the forensic expert revealed that Anil had suffered 65 stab wounds. The officers concluded that the attack was driven by someone with intense hatred towards her. The detectives noticed that the doors and windows were not forced, suggesting Anil knew the assailant and allowed them into the house. They even considered the possibility that Anil had planned to meet this person that day. However, a check of her mobile phone revealed no evidence of any invitation to her home. It seemed more likely that the encounter was by chance. With no surveillance cameras in the area, the officers interviewed neighbors. Some neighbors reported seeing a slender girl with black hair leaving the house. These accounts helped narrow down the suspects. Afterward, officers began questioning Anil's close friends and family. All her relatives had alibis and insisted that Anil had no enemies, was very friendly, and they couldn't imagine anyone wishing her harm. However, detectives found a post on Arandi's social network very suspicious, where she expressed shock at Anil's death. Some people offered their condolences, but others began accusing Arandi of being the murderer. The post quickly filled with comments blaming Arandi and claiming she was guilty. She then deleted her account's social network, but by then, it was too late. Police questioned several of Anil's friends to understand the relationship between Arandi and Anil. They all said that the two of them no longer played together, and it was clear that Arandi envied Anil for her greater popularity. After the interviews, detectives checked Arandi's social media profiles and found all the threatening posts she had made a few months earlier. However, that wasn't their only discovery. Just a few hours after it happened, Arandi posted that she was a fool and wondered what she had done. She was identified as the only suspect in the crime. This information was kept secret because officers worried Arandi might flee before they could arrest her. The agents patiently waited for the right moment. The case gained so much attention that hundreds of people gathered at a well-known funeral home in Guamachil to say goodbye to Anil. Friends, relatives, teachers, and classmates cried and hugged each other, struggling to believe that someone so young had passed away. Anil's funeral was very crowded, but two people were particularly noticeable, Arandi and her mother. Arandi entered the venue with her head down, and her long black hair partially hid her face. Her outfit was unusual for the hot weather. She wore a hoodie with the hood up and long sleeves, as if trying to hide something. Both she and her mother approached to offer condolences to Anil's family, then sat near the casket containing Anil's body. Everyone whispered and watched Arandi with tense expressions, noting how distressed she seemed. A few minutes after she arrived, officers quietly approached her and asked her to come with them to the police station. Arandi did not resist and went with the officer. The questioning started at the police station. At first, Arandi claimed to be innocent, but after a few questions, she broke down. She lifted her hoodie, showing scratches and bruises on her arms and torso. Arandi confessed that Anil caused these injuries while trying to defend herself. In December 2013, Anil posted a picture online with Arandi, where they appeared hugging, smiling, and partially naked. Arandi was upset because Anil posted a photo without her permission. She asked Anil to take it down, but Anil ignored her request. Eventually, Anil agreed to remove the photo, but by then, their friendship was broken beyond repair. The situation got worse when one of Arandi's classmates told her he had a compromising photo of her, which she suspected was the same one Anil had posted months earlier. From that point on, Arandi started thinking about how to get revenge. In the meantime, she expressed her anger on social media until she couldn't bear it anymore. On March 19, 2014, Arandi posted on her page, "In a world of 7 billion people, she only liked 3 of them." After that, she went to Anil's house in the Los Fuentes neighborhood. Arandi arrived at the door with 2 servings of ice cream and a big smile, saying she wanted to make amends and be friends again. Anil happily agreed and invited her inside. She even suggested they go upstairs to Anil's room on the 2nd floor to chat, just like old times. Once in the room, they started talking and eating ice cream. After a few minutes, Arandi suggested watching a movie. Arandi then said she needed to go to the bathroom and asked not to pause the movie. However, instead of going to the bathroom, Arandi went downstairs to the kitchen. She hid a sharp knife under her clothes and went back to the room where Anil was lying on the bed with her back to the door. Taking advantage of this, Arandi took out the knife and attacked her. Anil tried to defend herself by scratching, pushing, and punching, but she couldn't overpower Arandi. She lost too much blood and died, becoming a victim of a terrible crime. Arandi began to feel anxious, knowing she had to act quickly before Anil's family returned. She tried to clean up the blood using all the rags in the house, but there was so much that she could only clean a little. Eventually, she went to the bathroom, washed her hands, and changed into clothes from Anil's wardrobe. Then, Arandi closed the door to the room, leaving Annel's body inside, and ran out of the house, leaving the front door open. When Annel's relatives heard the story, they were outraged. They knew the tale about the photograph was false. Annel would never do such a thing, it wasn't in her nature. Additionally, Annel's friends stated they had never seen any such photograph. They argued that since both Arandi and Annel were quite popular, the photo would have certainly spread, and someone would have downloaded it. It became clear that envy was the real reason behind the crime. Nevertheless, the motive was no longer relevant. Arandi was the only suspect in the case. She was officially charged with involuntary manslaughter. The legal process moved quickly. Four officers escorted Arandi to the juvenile court proceedings at the prosecutor's office that handles cases involving minors. After a hearing lasting 1.5 hours, Arandi was found guilty. Even though it was clear she had executed a premeditated plan and the murder was intentional, but because she is only 16 years old, she was sentenced to 7 years in prison. She was transferred to the Juvenile Detention Center in Kaloa. Annel's family thought justice had been served and that it was all over, but they were very wrong. The defense filed an appeal, arguing that the trial took place in Caucan, which was incorrect, as the crime happened in the jurisdiction of Los Machos. The higher court decided to reopen the trial, this time in the appropriate jurisdiction. Despite the expedited process, the verdict was not overturned. This decision made the public extremely angry. Hundreds of Mexicans and foreigners shared images on social media with signs demanding justice for Annel. Several polls were conducted in which more than 5 million users voted, considering Arandi's sentence to be unfair. Many wanted her to receive a much longer sentence. The trial was retried, and Arandi was sentenced again to 7 years in prison. Hugo spoke with journalists and expressed his discontent. Although the sentence was not reduced, he believed Arandi's age was no reason not to impose a longer sentence. He hoped that at least she would serve the prescribed number of years. However, this didn't happen. On July 6, 2016, Arandi's sentence was reduced to 5 years. It was also decided that with good behavior, she could be released even sooner. State police had to close the courthouse gates as many journalists attempted to photograph her. This case became one of the most prominent in the country. Hugo was not informed about this hearing, which deeply angered him, worsening the situation further. On Friday, September 23, 2017, a hearing was held to assess Arandi's behavior in light of changes to the federal juvenile justice law. She was released after serving 3.5 years of her original sentence. Hugo left the court very dissatisfied, feeling he had witnessed a great injustice. He expressed his disappointment because the legislative reforms seemed to favor offenders instead of the victims. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ashley Wadsworth. Ashley Wadsworth was born on July 25, 2002, in Vernon Township, British Columbia, Canada. Her parents are Kenneth Wadsworth and Christy Jen Den, and she has an older sister named Haley. Ashley's family is large and close-knit, with over 50 relatives, including cousins, uncles, and aunts, all living in the same community. Ashley is a fun-loving, outgoing, and energetic girl, which makes her popular with many friends. She enjoys outdoor activities such as swimming, horseback riding, and skiing. Ashley is passionate about tennis and plays the clarinet. She is also very active on social media, frequently sharing memes, jokes, and photos. Ashley met Jack Seppel on social media in 2015 when she was 12 and he was 15. Jack was born on January 9, 1999. His mother is Tracy Dalton, who is married to Ricky. Jack's father passed away in 2019, and it is said that Jack had a strained relationship with his father. Jack did not keep in touch with his brother Jordan but did keep in touch with his sister Nadia. Apart from his mother and sister, he did not have many close relationships, choosing to interact with people mainly on social media and through video games. Some of Jack's acquaintances said that he often got into trouble at school. They remembered him as a cheerful, charming, and lively person, but he also had a dark side that showed when he was angry at himself and others. A friend of Ashley's spoke to Jack through social media and introduced the two young people to each other. Like many other teenagers, Ashley naturally connected with strangers on various platforms and formed virtual friendships, whether they had shared interests or were simply attracted to each other. Jack and Ashley quickly became virtual friends. At the time, Ashley did not have a smartphone and used the family computer to access social media, so her friendship with Jack was not a secret that her entire family knew about. Ashley's mother explained that during their long-distance relationship, Jack dated a few other girls and Ashley had her typical teenage experiences. Despite the periods of no contact, their relationship continued and they continued to communicate for many years. As they grew up, Ashley and Jack's relationship grew. They began to interact not only on social media but also through video calls. This led to a more intimate and romantic relationship. Eventually, Jack became close to Ashley's family. When family members saw the two talking, they would often greet him as if he were in the living room. Jack often sent Ashley gifts such as teddy bears and wallets. Ashley's family and friends often said that she constantly compared every guy she met to Jack. Because of the 8-hour time difference between Vernon and Essex, where Jack lives, the young couple would wake up too early and stay up too late just to talk. In 2018, when Ashley was 15, she expressed a desire to meet Jack in person. However, her family would not allow her to travel alone to another continent. Like any young couple, they sometimes argued. When these arguments led Ashley to block Jack on social media, he would create new accounts or send messages through his sister or friends. This behavior upset Ashley's loved ones, but she insists that Jack is compassionate and kind. In October 2018, Jack got Ashley's name tattooed on his arm. At the time, she was 16 and he was 19. Ashley's parents thought this display of affection was too much and warned her to be careful and not to do so. Later, during an argument, Jack stabbed Ashley's name tattoo with a knife. After that, he started to act jealous and violent. He would get angry if he thought Ashley was dating other guys, even though he continued to date other girls. However, he insisted that Ashley was the one he loved and claimed that he only wanted her. One day, Ashley called a girlfriend who was at Jack's house and told her that he wouldn't let her go. According to a friend who was present during the conversation, Ashley wasn't angry and even reacted as if she was used to such situations. She simply asked Jack to stop acting crazy. Ashley did not tell her parents about this, but she did tell her friends, who insisted that she stop all contact with him. Despite his frequent arguments and troublesome behavior, the couple eventually reconciled. Ashley began working at fast food restaurants and department stores, saving money to buy things. The first thing she bought was a tablet so she could use social media more privately. She then started saving money for a trip during her senior year of high school. Ashley joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Ashley graduated from Sighton High School in 2020, planning to study law at Thompson Rivers University to pursue a career as a lawyer. She continued to work and save money in the first half of 2021. In April of that year, she was baptized as a Mormon. Ashley, known for being bold and stubborn, decided to travel to the UK to meet Jack in person and celebrate his birthday. Although her parents and friends were not very enthusiastic about the idea, they could not stop her because she was of age and had her own money. On November 12, 2021, Ashley left Canada for the UK on a 6-month tourist visa, eager for her first trip abroad. Ashley and Jack met in person on November 13, 2021. That same day, Ashley updated her profile picture to show both of them. Jack, who was 22, looked much older than the cheerful 19-year-old Ashley. He had tattoos, including some on his face. During her time in London, Ashley lived with Jack at his home. Jack had been living alone since 2020 in a public housing estate in northwest Chelmsford. Despite the area's bad reputation, they explored the more beautiful parts of Chelmsford and Essex together. Jack was affectionate, attentive, full of compliments and eager to take romantic selfies. However, he could also be inconsistent and cruel. Because Ashley was on a tourist visa, she could not work, and Jack was unemployed, relying on benefits and occasional help from his mother, Tracy, who lived nearby. Ashley often posted photos and comments about their trips online, many of which showed the couple cuddling and enjoying romantic moments. She kept in touch with her family via video calls, making it seem like everything was going well. They even adopted a kitten called Winston. However, over time, instead of going for walks or sightseeing, he preferred to stay home, use illegal drugs, and play video games. In a foreign country, Ashley was limited by Jack's interests, although she loved being outdoors. Before coming to England, one of Ashley's church friends introduced her to American missionaries who would be in Chelmsford at the same time. Ashley wanted to meet these young men, who shared her faith, but Jack forbade her from going to church on Sundays. Despite this, she kept in touch with the missionaries via text messages, secretly deleting the conversations to avoid Jack's discovery. Her new church friends quickly realized that Jack was controlling and possibly abusive. When discussing her problems with them, Ashley admitted that she knew she deserved better but just wanted Jack to be happy. Jack's control did not extend to restricting Ashley's interactions with others. About 6 weeks after her arrival, Jack texted his mother to say that he had beaten Ashley because he had discovered that she had blocked 2 phone numbers in the UK, suspecting them to belong to other men, which made him jealous. While Ashley continued to post pictures of her seemingly perfect trip online, she secretly created another profile to document her bruises. She confided in her sister Haley, but threatened to stop talking to her if she told her mother, because Ashley did not want her family to hate Jack. In late December 2021, Jack overdosed on antidepressants. Ashley quickly called an ambulance. They took Jack to the hospital, where he was treated for the overdose. Ashley was then assigned as Jack's caretaker to ensure he was safe to take his medication. Ashley hid this condition from her mother and friends, but Haley accidentally revealed it. Concerned, their mother asked Ashley to return home, but Ashley insisted on staying until Jack recovered. In early January 2022, another incident occurred. Jack hit Ashley in the head with a cup, causing her to burst into tears. She called her sister on video chat while she was forced to clean up the broken glass. In the background, Haley could see Jack pacing back and forth, screaming and grinding his teeth. Although Haley begged younger sister to return home, Ashley refused. On the 9th of that month, Jack celebrated his 23rd birthday with his family as if nothing had happened, and Ashley was there. Soon after, Jack's mother and her husband arranged a family trip to a small coastal town, hoping that a change of scenery would ease the tension. The trip looked so perfect in the photos that even Ashley's parents, who had no idea of the severity of the situation, were relieved to see their daughter calm and happy. However, this calm did not last long. In late January, during an argument, Jack hit Ashley again and threw a candle and a TV remote at her while she was on a video call with her sister Haley, shortly after which Haley again begged her to come home. Ashley initially agreed but quickly changed her mind. She believed that somewhere inside that cruel man was still the charming boy she had known for years. She hoped that time, medicine, or her love could heal him. On the morning of February 1, 2022, Jack was angry with Ashley again. He told her to avoid him and secretly date someone else. He even demanded to see her phone and checked all of her social media. Just before 8 a.m., their neighbor, Helen Borton-Shaw, heard Ashley screaming through their shared wall. A few minutes later, Ashley showed up at Jack's door. When Helen saw her, Ashley was barefoot, crying and had a bleeding cut on her palm. Ashley explained that Jack had caught her looking at nude photos of a woman and became angry. He verbally abused her, then punched and smashed her phone and threw her kitten against the wall. Although Ashley feared that Jack was trying to harm her, she asked Helen not to call the police. Helen agreed but urged Ashley to go with her to the doctor instead of going back to Jack's apartment. Ashley refused, so Helen decided to talk to Jack herself. Jack apologized for the previous incidents and remained calm, then Helen left to go to the appointment. At around 9 a.m., Ashley used Jack's cell phone to call her family. At that time, Ashley's mother knew about Jack's situation because Haley had revealed everything. Her parents quickly bought her a return ticket for February 3rd. When Ashley told Jack she was leaving, he agreed to go with her to the airport. Ashley's mother warned her to go straight to the airport if Jack attacked her again and warned him that she would contact the police if he harmed her daughter again. Ashley talked to her family for about 3 hours. When they ended the call, it was 11 a.m. in Chelmsford and 3 a.m. in Vernon. A few minutes later, Jack texted his mother, admitting that he had severely beaten Ashley, knocked her down, and possibly broken her arm. This occurred between 11:22 a.m. and 12:38 p.m. Ashley sent several text messages to family and friends from Jack's phone. Because it was dark, no one answered. She also texted her friends at the Chelmsford church, asking for help and describing the emergency. Unfortunately, these messages were not read until hours later, when it was too late to help. Between 12:38 and 12:45, Jack attacked Ashley by choking her until she stopped breathing. He then went into the kitchen. Jack took an 11-centimeter knife and stabbed Ashley in the chest and stomach about 100 times, killing her. After the brutal act, he changed his profile picture to a picture of him and Ashley, adding the caption, "Always mine." He recorded a video for Haley, expressing his love for Ashley, apologizing, admitting that he couldn't let her go and saying that he wasn't in the right mind. The video, which was never sent, shows Ashley's body lying next to him. While this was happening in England, Ashley's family in Vernon woke up to several messages from Ashley. They contacted Jamie Ashworth, a Mormon friend in Chelmsford. Jamie and Tyler Borden, another church acquaintance, went to Jack's apartment. After knocking on the door but getting no response, they called the police and left. Meanwhile, Ashley's best friend in Vernon noticed that Ashley's social media accounts were still active. In desperation, she sent a text message to Ashley. Messages from Ashley's family and friends continued to pour in, but Jack ignored them, even though they were eager to hear from her. Jack eventually called his sister Nadia. When she answered, he admitted to killing Ashley and even showed her the body. The incident happened at around 4:13 p.m. When the police entered the apartment after receiving Jamie's call, they arrived within 10 minutes. Unfortunately, it was too late. The police arrested Jack immediately. He was covered in blood and told the officers that he was psychotic, confessing to the crime. He was then taken to Chelmsford Prison. Jack Seppel's trial began on September 7, 2022, at Chelmsford Crown Court. Before the trial, Jack underwent a medical examination. A toxicology report found that he had a small amount of an illegal substance and a small amount of an antidepressant in his system. A psychiatric assessment concluded that he was fit to give evidence and stand trial. After considering the evidence against him, the court found that his guilt was clear. This evidence included a video recording of Jack confessing to the crime. Faced with this overwhelming evidence, Jack immediately pleaded guilty. The judge then informed him that, due to the seriousness of his actions and his subsequent confession, the only sentence he could receive was life imprisonment. During the trial, prosecutor Simon Spence detailed Jack's lengthy criminal record, which dates back to 2014. It was the first time Ashley's parents had learned the true nature of their daughter's boyfriend. Jack had a history of multiple arrests for stalking, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and violent assault. He had also been issued with a number of restraining orders against him by his mother and ex-girlfriend. The revelation of Jack's violent and brutal past shocked Ashley's parents, who were shocked to learn of the criminal record of the man who took their daughter's life. During the hearing, the prosecution and defense presented their views on a letter Jack sent to Ashley's family while he was in prison. In the letter, Jack expressed remorse for his actions. Judge Murray ruled that the letter could be made public, citing the importance of transparency in the justice system. In the letter, Jack addressed Ashley's entire family, especially her mother and sister, Haley. He acknowledged that no action could have undone the harm he had caused or lessened their suffering. Jack accepted responsibility for his actions and acknowledged that his mental state played a significant role in the tragedy. He also stated that he had openly discussed his mental health struggles with Ashley. After his trial, Jack Seppel was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 23 years. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez. Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez was born in the fall of 1990 in Oñan, the capital of Paraguay. She was the oldest of two daughters in a poor working-class family. When the girls were still young, their parents divorced. Their mother, Miriam Rodriguez, had to raise them alone. She worked multiple jobs because her ex-husband did not provide any financial support and showed no interest in their well-being. When Romina was still in school, she started working to support her mother and younger sister. At 17, she entered a romantic relationship with a boy named Christopher. He courted her sweetly, and they dreamed of a future together. However, their happiness ended when Romina discovered she was pregnant and told Christopher. He responded by giving her an ultimatum that she could either have an abortion or they would break up for good. Romina was deeply wounded by her lover's words, but after talking to her parents, who she had always been close to, she made the decision to keep the baby. Her greatest fear was that having an abortion at such a young age might prevent her from ever becoming a mother in the future. Therefore, she felt she had no other option. Christopher, true to his word, ended all communication with her and showed no interest in Romina or their child's well-being. At 18, Romina gave birth to a son named Lucas. The arrival of the baby only made their already difficult financial situation worse. Money was extremely tight, and now Romina had to support her grandson too. Feeling depressed about their circumstances, she wanted to improve things and help her family, but she struggled to find a well-paying job in Paraguay. She called her aunt, who lived in sunny Spain. Her aunt invited her to come stay, saying it would be easier for Romina to settle there and that Europe offered more opportunities than Latin America. Without thinking too much, Romina packed only the essentials and bought a plane ticket to Spain. She left her 2-year-old son in the care of her mother and sister, planning to bring him to her once she found a new home and a stable job. In late summer 2010, Romina flew to Madrid and then traveled to Alcobendas, a provincial town, where she stayed at her aunt's house. She quickly started searching for a job, and luck was on her side. She secured a position as an administrator at a hotel, earning a good salary. She sent some of her earnings back home and used the rest to rent her own apartment, so as not to impose on her generous relatives. Romina soon met a man named Javier, and they entered into a tumultuous relationship. Like her, Javier had immigrated to Europe seeking happiness and a better life. He was originally from El Salvador, worked in construction, and appeared to be a serious individual. However, when Romina became pregnant, Javier was once again unprepared for the responsibility of parenthood. Despite this, they attempted to live together for a time. Unfortunately, shortly after their son was born, they ultimately separated. Romina found herself in a challenging situation, stranded in a foreign country with a newborn and unsure of what to do next. For a time, she returned to her aunt's house, where she received support and assistance. When the boy was about 6 months old, Romina returned to work because she couldn't afford to stay home. A few months later, she faced another shock. She had been ignoring her poor health and weakness, thinking they were just due to stress and fatigue. However, when Romina finally visited the doctor, she received a cancer diagnosis. She underwent several rounds of chemotherapy, lost her hair, and lost a significant amount of weight, but ultimately triumphed over the disease. After her treatment, she quickly recovered, continued working, and used wigs to cover her hair loss. Romina believed that after enduring such difficult challenges, a period of happiness was on the horizon. She saved money and planned to take her eldest son, along with her mother and sister, on a trip to Spain. In the summer of 2017, Romina attended an event with friends where she met a man named Raul Diaz. He was attractive, impressive, had a stable job, and was financially secure. Raul was drawn to Romina's beauty and began asking mutual friends about her. Romina was equally interested in Raul, and when he invited her on a date, she happily accepted. Raul was nearly 15 years older than Romina and worked as a lead process engineer at a large energy company. He had been through 2 divorces and had 2 teenage daughters from previous relationships, but Romina was not bothered by the age gap. Similarly, she was also a single mother, raising sons from her own 2 past relationships. After just one date, they quickly realized they were in love and didn't want to be apart. Romina, filled with excitement, enthusiastically shared her happiness with friends. Her new partner showered her with small gifts and thoughtful surprises nearly every day, organized romantic outings, sent flowers with heartfelt messages, and offered her compliments. Romina felt she had finally found true love and a man who would accept her and her sons. However, she soon began to hear unsettling rumors about him. People claimed that he had been rude and even cruel to his former wives, which had led to the end of both his marriages. Despite this, Romina didn't want to believe the rumors, although she noticed that Raul had no contact with either his ex-wives or his daughters. Despite their significant age difference and the presence of children from previous relationships, the couple did not let these factors stand in their way. Just 6 months after they met, they chose to move in together in a luxurious villa on Lanzarote, one of the Canary Islands. To Romina, this place felt like paradise, but her happiness was short-lived. Raul, who initially seemed like the perfect partner, soon revealed a controlling side. At first, they lived with Romina's youngest son, and Raul made an effort to take care of the child. Romina even believed he would be a great father to her boys. Raul promised her a long and happy life together, assuring her that he would take care of her and the children. Romina, deeply in love, trusted his words and eagerly accepted his proposal to marry him. However, Raul insisted they needed time alone together to fully enjoy their relationship before the wedding. Raul not only wanted to take Romina's eldest child from Paraguay, but he also hoped to distance himself from her youngest son. Despite this, Romina trusted her partner and ignored warnings from her friends who noticed his odd behavior. In June 2018, Raul purchased tickets for Romina and her child to travel to Paraguay, along with a return ticket solely for Romina. When she returned home and shared details about her partner, her mother and sister became uneasy about Raul's intentions. They suspected he simply wanted to get rid of her children. Romina was hurt by their comments and ended up having a small argument with her family. A few days later, she flew back to Spain, promising to return for the boys in the fall. When Romina got back, she received a warm welcome, and for 2 months, she was happily alone with Raul. However, in August, just a few days before the wedding, Raul violently attacked Romina. This was a shocking experience for her, but he pleaded for her forgiveness on his knees, assuring her that it would never happen again, and she chose to believe him. Romina did not report the incident or tell anyone about it. On August 10th, she attended the wedding with makeup covering her bruises, unaware that the man she was marrying would soon take her life. 2 weeks after the wedding, the girl returned to Paraguay, not to pick up her sons as she had initially planned, but to visit her family. Her mother and sister were confused by the changes they noticed in her since they last saw each other. Romina appeared upset and disoriented. She walked with a noticeable limp and had bruises on her neck, which she tried to cover with a scarf. When asked about her condition, Romina either remained silent or claimed she had hurt herself accidentally. She stayed at home for nearly a month, which surprised her relatives since she had just gotten married. Romina explained that her husband had suggested she visit her children because she missed them. Miriam praised her son-in-law for being generous, but she still couldn't understand why her daughter seemed so unhappy. In mid-September, Romina secretly borrowed money from her relatives to buy a return ticket to Spain because her husband refused to pay for it. This should have been a clear sign that returning was not a good idea, yet Romina still hoped for a happy resolution to their marriage. On September 17th, at the airport, her mother, sister, and sons saw her for the last time. After returning to her husband, Romina's life began to feel like a nightmare. Raul, who was using illegal drugs, no longer hid his addiction from her. When under the influence, he became aggressive and emotionally abused Romina. Each time she tried to leave, he promised to change and insisted that it wouldn't happen again. After the beatings and threats, there were often brief periods when Romina's husband would become loving and caring again, showering her with gifts and planning romantic outings. However, these peaceful moments became shorter over time, and instances of violence occurred more frequently. Just before the new year, Romina confided in her best friend that she feared her husband and worried he might eventually kill her. On December 29th, Raul beat her so severely that she had to seek medical attention. The hospital staff noticed something was wrong and considered calling the police to report the incident. At that moment, Raul arrived and insisted that Romina had simply fallen and that there was no need to involve the authorities. Romina went along with his story, declined hospitalization, and returned home with him. On January 1, 2019, Miriam, Romina's mother, repeatedly tried to call her daughter, but Romina did not answer. Concerned, Miriam then called her son-in-law to check on Romina, but he also did not answer. After several days of no contact, Miriam sent Raul a message indicating she would go to the police for help. This prompted Raul to quickly return her call, explaining that he and Romina had a fight on December 31st, after which she left with her belongings. He reassured Miriam that Romina would be okay and would return home soon, as this had happened before. Miriam, however, doubted Raul's explanation and felt something was wrong with her daughter. She insisted that Raul report the situation to the police. Finally, on January 8th, pressured by Romina's family, Raul reported her disappearance. This time, he altered his story slightly, claiming that after their quarrel, Romina had taken some money from him and suggested that she might have gone to Paraguay to see the children, which is why he was not too worried before he heard from Miriam. What was Raul hiding? His testimony was filled with confusion and contradictions, raising many questions and suspicions. As a result, law enforcement decided to investigate the couple's life. After speaking with friends and family, they discovered that the marriage was far from perfect. Romina had often complained to loved ones about her husband's abuse, though she never provided details. Others frequently noticed bruises and injuries on her body. The police decided to place Raul under covert surveillance, tapping his phone conversations. However, Raul seemed to sense that he was being monitored and acted very cautiously, avoiding any behavior that might raise suspicion. Despite this, the investigation continued, and it was soon revealed that Romina had visited the hospital on December 29 with signs of severe beating. Her husband almost forcibly took her from the hospital, preventing her from going to the police. A few months ago, Romina filed a report for domestic violence but retracted it the following day. A week later, Raul, having calmed down somewhat, made a phone call to a relative in the police and carelessly mentioned that his wife was no longer alive and that her body would never be found. This statement prompted police to arrest him as the primary suspect and interrogate him thoroughly. Raul claimed that on New Year's Eve, his wife had been drinking heavily and started to argue with him. She demanded that he bring their children to live with them. When he said he wasn't ready for that, she had a violent outburst, started fighting, and began throwing things at him. Raul stated that he left his house for a few hours until things calmed down. Upon returning, he discovered Romina in the bathtub, unresponsive. He suggested that she had suffocated due to excessive drinking but was worried he might be suspected of her death or accused of murder. To protect himself, Raul decided to erase all evidence and report her as missing. Everyone was shocked by his admission of how he disposed of her body. He claimed he burned Romina's body on a barbecue in the backyard. Living in a luxury complex with a spacious area, he thought the neighbors wouldn't notice what he was doing or smell the burning flesh. However, he underestimated the situation because the barbecue did not function like a crematorium, and her remains were not fully burned after several hours. He then removed the body from the fire, cut it into parts, and put the pieces into separate bags. A few days later, he rented a car to transport the dismembered body to a remote and desolate area of the island, where he discarded the bags into the sea from the cliffs. The police spent weeks searching the shoreline and surrounding areas based on Raul's statements about where he had thrown his wife's remains. Divers and many volunteers participated in the search for body fragments underwater, but none of their efforts produced any findings. Meanwhile, on January 16, Raul was officially charged with domestic violence and the murder of his wife. This development followed a detailed search of his home, which utilized specialized equipment and luminol. This search uncovered multiple traces of washed blood in different rooms. Investigators discovered that Raul had been ordering caustic soda online, a substance used for removing organic materials and paint. In one of the second-floor rooms, he had scrubbed a bloody stain on the floor so aggressively that he damaged it and then attempted to cover it up with paint. According to investigators, this is the room where Raul dismembered his wife's body. Additionally, a broken piece of Romina's fingernail was found on the floor, which had traces of blood and Raul's skin cells, suggesting that she may have been alive and fought back during the incident. Also in the bathroom, investigators discovered Romina's contact lens stuck to the wall, possibly from a strong impact to her face. Despite extensive searching, law enforcement could not find any other remains. Meanwhile, a tourist called to report a lung fragment he found on the beach. He was unsure if it was from a human or an animal, but knowing that authorities were looking for a body in the area, he reported his discovery. By the end of February, forensic analysis confirmed that the lung fragment belonged to Romina. Raul continued to claim his innocence despite the evidence and examination results. He maintained his original belief that the woman had drowned in a bathtub while heavily intoxicated, even though evidence suggested there had been a violent struggle. He also stated that he did not use any tools to dismember the body. Instead, he claimed to have tried to burn it completely on a barbecue, asserting that the remains fell apart due to the heat, and he then placed them in bags to dispose of. This account was false for several reasons. First, the body of the adult Romina could not have fit in the fixture in his yard. Second, bones cannot become so fragile from fire that they fall apart without tools. Additionally, Separating the lung from the body would require opening the chest, which cannot be done with bare hands. The investigation could not determine exactly how Raul killed his wife, but the evidence of a struggle in their home suggested that he may have beaten her to death. It was clear that Raul dismembered her body in the same room where he later repainted the floor to hide the blood. Eventually, faced with overwhelming evidence, he admitted that he accidentally killed his wife during a fight, contradicting his earlier claim that he found her dead in the bathtub. Despite his claims that she was drunk and violent, the defendant was found guilty in June 2023. Romina's family felt the sentence was too lenient. He received a 12.5-year sentence for involuntary manslaughter, 2 years for confirmed domestic violence, and 1 year for causing serious bodily harm to Romina in December 2018 when she was hospitalized. He also received several months for bodily abuse. In total, the combined punishment was less than 16 years in prison. Raul is currently serving his sentence while simultaneously trying to appeal the court's decision. The story of Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez serves as a poignant reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic violence and the complex struggles faced by individuals seeking a better life. Despite her resilience and efforts to overcome adversity, Romina became a victim of a controlling and abusive relationship, ultimately leading to her untimely demise. The court's lenient verdict against her perpetrator reflects the ongoing challenges in addressing domestic violence, leaving her family and loved ones grappling with their loss and advocating for justice. As we reflect on Romina's case, it is crucial to continue raising awareness about the importance of supporting victims and holding abusers accountable to prevent such tragedies in the future. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Inman family. William Inman and Sandra's story began in 1983 when they met at church. He was 18 and she was 16. With their parents' approval, they quickly got married and moved to Logan, Ohio. William was a devoted religious man who worked as a builder. In his free time, he volunteered at the Evangelical Church of the Tabernacle of Faith near Nelson Villa, where he played musical instruments. Meanwhile, Sandra, as a housewife, supported her husband's spiritual activities. In 1984, the couple had their first child, a son named William Jr. To prevent any confusion, the church community referred to the father as Bill and the son as Will. Over the years, Will grew up. In 2001, at the age of 17, he met 15-year-old Summer Cook at a church service. Their meeting was strikingly similar to the love story of Bill and Sandra. The young couple dated for 3 years, and in 2004, after Summer turned 18, they got married. They quickly settled into Will's parents' large house in Logan. In the same year, 39-year-old Bill Inman declared himself a spiritual leader and turned his garage into a temporary church, where he started holding services. Although local residents were initially skeptical of him as a self-proclaimed pastor, his church began to gather followers. It started with neighbors and gradually expanded to their acquaintances. People were drawn there to pray, seek comfort, and make donations. In 2005, Will and Summer joyfully welcomed a son named Alex. However, they soon encountered financial challenges. Will's work at the church did not provide enough income, so the family chose to seek better opportunities in another state. In 2006, the Inman family relocated to Florida. They soon found jobs in the construction industry, building hotels in their new location. Meanwhile, Sandra and Summer looked after their home and raised little Alex. After 2 years, however, they missed their hometown and decided to return to Ohio. Unfortunately, they had lost the right to repurchase their previous house in Logan while they were away, so they had to rent a different place in rural Vinton. In 2008, shortly after returning, Will and Summer welcomed their second child, a daughter named Kale. 2 years later, they had their third child, another daughter named Alana. Despite the difficulties of raising young children, Will and Summer made an effort to carve out time for themselves. Almost every weekend, they entrusted their kids to Bill and Sandra, who happily embraced their roles as grandparents. For this elderly couple, their grandchildren brought immense joy and purpose to their lives. In the spring of 2010, Bill Inman was officially appointed as a pastor of the Church of the Tabernacle of Faith. Alongside his wife, he established a charitable organization named Ranch of Mercy, which was created to assist those in need, particularly people who had lost their jobs or homes. Bill had a vision of constructing a large shelter for orphans and widows, intending to build it himself. Unfortunately, he faced challenges due to insufficient funding to make this dream a reality. Bill proposed holding a lottery to raise funds. He planned to sell tickets for $10 each to reach his financial goal. The winner will receive either a new house or $200,000. Bill also promised to give away 99 other valuable prizes in a raffle. Information about the lottery was shared through local media and advertising. Bill went door to door, encouraging people to support the cause by buying tickets, assuring them that the money raised would be used to build a shelter for those in need. In total, Inman sold 100,000 tickets and raised $1 million. The prize draw is set for September 2010. While Bill was busy with charity work, issues were developing in the Inman family. In June 2010, Summer informed her husband that she wanted a divorce after 6 years of marriage. Before this conversation, she had written a painful entry in her diary, expressing that she was very tired of trying to please everyone and felt exhausted. She questioned whether she deserved happiness and if she had the right to fall in love again and feel loved in return. She acknowledged that it might not be the best time, but she felt the need to tell Will the truth, believing he deserved to know that she did not want to be with him anymore. She mentioned that she needed time alone to figure out who she really was, as she felt like she was just following orders at that moment. Summer emphasized her love for her children, stating that she wouldn't trade them for the world, but she did not want them to see their mother merely obeying someone else. She expressed uncertainty about how Will would react, fearing that he might get angry, try to take the kids, or even threaten her. She believed they should share equal time with the children, but she knew his parents would oppose this and try to persuade her to stay, although she realized that wouldn't change anything. She also recounted that yesterday, Will had asked her what she wanted, but she couldn't answer because all she knew was what she didn't want, to be unhappy and feel trapped. Yet, she remained silent every day, saying that all she could do was cry and sleep. She admitted that she just didn't know how to escape the situation and make everything right, hoping that when she wrote again, she would have found the answer. Summer filed for divorce and moved out of the Inman's house with the children and essential belongings to her parents' home. She wanted to ensure that Alex, Cale, and Alana could still communicate with their father, so she allowed them to visit Will and his parents. 2 months after leaving her husband, Summer began a relationship with Adam Peters. At the same time, she took a job as a cleaner at a bank in downtown Logan, as she had no formal education and struggled to find other employment. Meanwhile, September and October passed, but the drawing that Bill from Ranch of Mercy had promised never took place. It also became clear that construction on the prize house hadn't even started, and the Bill family was slow to refund people's money for the tickets. In early December 2010, the Inmans received notice that they needed to leave their rented home due to unpaid debts. After this news, Summer, accompanied by Adam, went to collect their belongings. However, Will and his parents refused to let her in. Summer called the police, claiming that Will was threatening her and wouldn't return her personal items. When officers arrived, Will continued to deny entry. He threatened to shoot Adam, and even got into a confrontation with a police officer. In her statement, Summer explained that before their wedding, she and Will appeared to have a perfect relationship, but everything changed after they married. Will became controlling and jealous, making unfounded accusations. He dictated her actions and invaded her privacy, affecting her eating habits, household responsibilities, and even their sexual relationship. Summer was so restricted that she couldn't sleep without his permission. He essentially kept her confined to the house and took away her phone and keys. She revealed that Will had always wanted to have 12 children with her and had even considered marrying a second wife. He frequently visited websites for polygamous families, where he shared explicit photos. Will also threatened to kill Summer if she tried to leave him. At one point, he took her cherished cats, drove them far away, and then lied, saying they had escaped through an open window, laughing and claiming she would never see them again. After Summer accused him of wrongdoing, Will attempted to defend his actions by saying he took her phone and keys because he thought she was being unfaithful. Regarding the cats, he claimed he took them to a shelter because they were scratching the furniture and being aggressive to family members. Eventually, Will was ordered to stay away from Summer, and he received a fine and probation for his actions. A custody battle began between the two families. The Inmans reported to the police that Adam Peters posed a danger to Alex, Kaylee, and Alana. A frightening incident occurred late on the night of March 22, 2011. 25-year-old Summer was finishing her shift at the bank. As usual, she cleaned up her workspace and went outside around 11 p.m. to take out the trash. Before leaving, Summer had sent a message to Adam, whom she was supposed to meet after work, but he never saw her again. Concerned, Adam went to the bank after midnight. He couldn't find Summer, but near the trash can he discovered her belongings, her phone, keys, and a running music player with headphones on. A little further away, he found her jacket in the bushes. Adam called the police and notified Summer's parents about her disappearance. Initially, the family thought that she might have been late from work or misplaced her belongings. However, the bank security service informed them that she hadn't been seen since her shift ended. When the police arrived, several witnesses were already present. Two women jogging nearby reported that they had seen Summer being kidnapped about an hour earlier. They explained that as Summer approached a dumpster, a Ford Crown Victoria, driven by a blonde woman, pulled up. Two men wearing black balaclavas exited the vehicle, grabbed Summer, and forced her into the back seat. Despite her attempts to resist, scream, and plead for help, one of the witnesses who tried to intervene was met with pepper spray from the female driver. The kidnappers then drove away with Summer. The two women rushed to the nearest police station to report the incident, but for some reason, law enforcement was skeptical and even suspicious of their account, suspecting they might have fabricated the story for amusement. A whole hour had passed after Summer's parents called the police before they finally arrived at the crime scene. Unfortunately, by that time, it was too late for them to find Summer while the trail was still fresh. News of the abduction of 25-year-old Summer Inman quickly spread through local media. Hundreds of residents of Logan joined the search effort, but as days went by, hope of finding her alive began to fade. Summer's parents struggled to keep their thoughts away from the worst possible outcome. A few weeks prior to the tragedy, Summer had posted a picture on Facebook with Adam and the children, depicting what appeared to be a happy family. This photo infuriated Will Inman, Summer's husband. It had been revealed that Summer met Adam before deciding to divorce Will. In the spring of 2010, Adam started working for the Inmans, maintaining their house and yard, and he soon developed feelings for Summer. Initially, she rejected his advances, but eventually, she gave in. In her diary, she reflected on that moment, expressing that when their eyes met, she realized she had let the devil take hold of her and ignored the warnings from God. She mentioned that she tried to walk away, with her mind screaming to run, but she stayed and allowed Adam to embrace her, expressing her regret and guilt. Meeting Adam marked the beginning of the end for Summer and Will's marriage, as she realized that she wanted to pursue happiness, love, and to be loved, which ultimately led her to file for divorce. 5 days before Summer disappeared, Will attempted to challenge the alimony payments in court. He wanted to reduce the amount he had to pay his ex-wife from $150 per child each month to $50, as his annual income was only $6,500. Will, along with his parents, sought sole custody of the children, but the judge denied their request. Bill and Sandra deeply missed their grandchildren, who were the center of their lives. Since separating from Summer, the elderly couple had visibly lost weight and appeared weary. In March 2011, shortly after Summer went missing, the police found the Inman family, Bill, Sandra, and Will, were hiding in Bill's mother's house in Jackson County, Ohio. During questioning, all three of them consistently denied any involvement in Summer's disappearance. They explained that on the night she vanished, they had traveled to Cleveland to look at a new house. However, their car broke down, and they spent the entire night trying to fix it on the side of the road. They returned home to Logan the following morning. The Inmans stated that they had always treated Summer well and rarely had conflicts with her. However, they noted that after Adam Peters came into their lives, things took a turn for the worse. Bill, Sandra, and Will described Adam as a negative influence who had ruined their previously happy family. The police took an interest in a white Ford Crown Victoria that was parked near the Inman's house. They seized the car's GPS navigator and examined its route. They discovered that on the afternoon of March 22, when the kidnapping took place, the car was in Logan. The GPS was turned off at 5:30 p.m. that evening and only activated again the following morning, March 23, still in Logan. There was no evidence that the Inman family ever came to Cleveland. Additionally, phone records indicated that the suspects remained in Logan throughout the night from March 22 to March 23. On the morning of March 23 at 7:30 a.m., Bill, Sandra, and Will were seen at a car wash, where they had the car thoroughly cleaned inside. Summer was not with them. Afterward, the Inmans traveled to Cleveland, where they changed the tires at an auto repair shop. The mechanic found it unusual that Bill chose to replace nearly new tires with older ones. Additionally, the Inmans attempted to alter the car's appearance, and Bill removed a spotlight that he had previously installed near the side mirror. After the arrest, Bill attempted to reassure his elderly mother that they were innocent and that the trials they faced were a form of divine punishment. However, after several hours of intense questioning and realizing that all three could face the death penalty, Sandra eventually broke down. She confessed that they were responsible for the kidnapping of Summer on that tragic night. The men wearing balaclavas were identified as her husband, Bill, and her son, Will. Sandra explained that the abduction was entirely her idea. She intended to scare her daughter-in-law into allowing Will to see their children, but things quickly spiraled out of control. She stated that Will would admit to guilt for both murder and kidnapping. Sandra acknowledged that it was her idea to take Summer, explaining that she believed this would frighten her. Will tied Summer's hands, feet, and neck with plastic ties. Summer struggled and screamed, but then suddenly lost consciousness. Upon noticing that she was unresponsive, Will panicked and wanted to cut her free. He called out to his mother, asking where the knife was because he couldn't find it. As the family desperately searched for the knife, precious minutes passed. It was too late, and Summer had suffocated. Sandra insisted that they never intended to harm their daughter-in-law. Their goal was simply to scare her in order to resolve a custody dispute over the grandchildren so they could see them on weekends. On March 29, 2011, 1 week after the abduction, Sandra revealed the location where they had hidden the body. Summer was placed in an abandoned well on the property of the church that the Inman family attended, known as the Church of the Tabernacle of Faith, which is situated near Nelsonville, 30 kilometers from the bank where Summer worked. Bill Inman had previously helped build this church, and 28 years ago, he and Sandra got married there under its arches. When the police removed the concrete lid from the well, they discovered a disturbing scene. Summer was at the bottom, her body positioned head first. She was dressed in the same outfit she had worn on her last day, a black t-shirt that read, "I don't have an anger problem, I have an idiot problem." The autopsy revealed that Summer had died from strangulation. Besides the marks left by plastic ties on her neck, wrists, and ankles, there were no other injuries on her body. Sandra originally intended to dispose of the body in the river. However, she later thought the church well would be a safer place where it wouldn't be discovered. She confessed to her crime and showed genuine remorse for her actions. The trial soon followed. Bill, 49, and Will, 28, both pleaded not guilty to Summer's murder. Throughout the hearings, they spoke very little and avoided making eye contact with her parents. In contrast, Sandra took full responsibility for the crime, reiterating that the abduction was her idea. As she delivered her final statement, the woman tearfully pleaded for forgiveness from Summer's parents. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sandra clearly expressed her deep regret for the tragic events. "Summer was like a daughter to me," she cried. "If I could turn back time, I would never have made this terrible choice." In 2012, the court sentenced Bill and Will Inman to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sandra received a life sentence but is eligible for parole after 15 years. The church friends and parishioners all agreed that Bill was the one controlling everything in the Inman family. He made all the decisions. No one thought that the idea of the kidnapping came from Sandra. It was well known that Will had been spoiled as a child, with his parents giving in to his every demand. Sandra realized that both her husband and son were as guilty as she was, but she continued to plead guilty, hoping that it would lessen the consequences for them. Alex, Cale, and Alana were cared for by the parents of Summer, who had passed away, for an extended period. They struggled to explain to their grandchildren the absence of their mother, father, grandmother, and grandfather. The tragic story of the Inman family highlights how concealed anger, jealousy, and a need to control others can result in devastating outcomes. Bill and Sandra, who appeared to embody piety and strong family values to everyone, revealed themselves to be oppressive figures to their daughter-in-law. Summer found herself trapped in a toxic relationship that stifled her will and desires. Her efforts to escape ultimately cost her life. Will, who was raised in this oppressive environment, became selfish and resistant to compromise. His obsession with reclaiming his wife and children at any price ultimately led to his downfall. The terrible crime committed by the Inman's family shattered multiple families, leaving 3 young children without their mother and a grandfather and grandmother without their beloved family member. This story highlights the importance of letting go of grudges, respecting others' boundaries, and building relationships based on trust and respect. Holding on to anger can eventually lead to outbursts that damage the most valuable aspects of our lives. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Valeria Vivano. Valeria Fern Vivano was born on May 29, 1996, in La Granja, a small commune near Santiago, Chile's capital. She was the youngest of 3 children in a modest family, with her parents Miguel and Jacqueline Vivano. She grew up with her older brother Michelangelo and sister Daniela. Her father worked for a transportation company, while her mother stayed at home to care for the children and create a warm family atmosphere. When Valeria started school, her parents decided to separate, which was a huge shock for her. Even though they continued to communicate after the divorce and her father is still very interested in his children's lives, including providing financial support, Valeria felt resentment towards him. They sometimes argued and went months without speaking, but they always managed to reconcile. Soon after the divorce, Miguel remarried, and Valeria gained 2 half-siblings. She maintained warm family relationships with them, as well as with her siblings, Daniela and Michelangelo. Jacqueline, on the other hand, never remarried. She focused on raising her children and later took care of her grandchildren. From a young age, Valeria showed a strong character, determination, and remarkable perseverance in everything she did. She excelled academically, participated in sports, and was always brave and fair, willing to help others, even when it put her at risk. She pursued a career in law enforcement because of her desire to help people in need and fight for justice. After finishing high school, Valeria enrolled in a police academy in Santiago, where she graduated with honors in 2016, becoming an investigator. At just 20 years old, she joined the Chilean police force. The following year, she started working in the bureau that investigates serious crimes in the capital. From the very beginning, Valeria demonstrated her commitment as a law enforcement officer and her passion for justice. She loved her job, carried out her responsibilities with care, and was always ready to respond to emergencies, even in the middle of the night. She would rush to crime scenes, pursue criminals, and sometimes had to provide emotional support to people who had lost loved ones. Her colleagues described Valeria as kind, cheerful, and friendly, while also recognizing her as a true professional and a dependable partner. Valeria served in the police force for nearly 5.5 years, during which she received numerous awards and recognition. She advanced in her career, gaining the respect of her colleagues and the admiration of her superiors. She also represented her department in Spain, spending about 2 weeks in Madrid on an official visit. She took great pride in being entrusted with such significant responsibilities. By 2020, she had been promoted to assistant inspector. In January 2020, Valeria welcomed a new member to her precinct, 21 years old Lionel Alejandro Contreras Canales, who had just graduated from the police academy. Valeria took on the role of his mentor as he started his first job. A few months later, they became partners and initially got along well. Lionel comes from a wealthy and powerful family, with an uncle who is a high-ranking official. Having grown up in comfort and always getting what he wanted, because of this, he became quite selfish and believed that everything should go his way. Valeria noticed her new colleague, Lionel, who repeatedly tried to get her attention and asked her out several times. Each time, she firmly rejected him. Valeria was serious about her job and believed that workplace romances were inappropriate. She viewed Lionel as immature, not because he was 3 years younger, but due to his childish behavior. Despite this, she hoped to help him grow up. In July 2020, Valeria and Lionel attempted to catch robbers who had stolen money from a store's cash register. The criminals remained at the scene and opened fire, leading to a shootout in which Lionel fatally shot both of them. While this situation could have been avoided, Lionel's response was considered appropriate for apprehending the suspects. Nonetheless, this incident put a strain on the relationship between Valeria and Lionel. Valeria's last birthday celebration was on May 29, 2021, when she turned 25. The event took place at her mother's house and was attended by many guests, including family, friends, and co-workers. However, Lionel was not invited. Valeria decided not to invite his, as he had recently tried to pursue her again, and she wanted to avoid any awkwardness. When Valeria attempted to discuss with him, he only reiterated his feelings for her, which she preferred to keep private from her colleagues. Despite the big turnout, presents, warm wishes, and heartfelt congratulations, Valeria appeared upset, even as she tried to smile. She had recently argued with her father and they hadn't spoken in days. Valeria had hoped her father would come to her birthday, but instead, he only sent a brief congratulatory message and didn't even call. Jacqueline, her mother, recognized her daughter's unhappiness and understood the cause of her sorrow. Frustrated with her ex-husband's behavior, she believed he would eventually reach out to Valeria and they would resolve their differences, as they had in the past. Tragically, Valeria and her father never had the opportunity to speak again. Just 2 weeks later, on June 13, 2021, Valeria lost her life while on duty. She was working the night shift, patrolling the streets and checking vehicles as part of a manhunt for a suspect in connection with a crime against a young woman that occurred yesterday on the outskirts of the capital. Authorities were on high alert for a white Kia, suspected to be driven by one of the criminals. The suspect likely had a weapon and may not have been alone in the vehicle. Valeria was in a patrol car with her partner, Lionel, and they were being driven by Deputy Commissioner Felipe Gilardo. They spotted the suspect's vehicle and decided to chase it without waiting for backup. The officers successfully blocked the suspect's escape. Lionel and Vivano got out of their car with their guns drawn, ordering the suspects to surrender and exit their vehicle with their hands raised. Suddenly, a single gunshot was heard, leaving everyone confused about who had fired and from where. Valeria, holding her side, collapsed onto the asphalt next to the police car. Reinforcements arrived at that moment, and Valeria's colleagues heard the gunshot and saw she was injured, but they didn't fully understand what had happened or who had shot her. Taking advantage of the chaos, the criminals quickly fled the scene while first aid was being given to the wounded officer. Despite the swift arrival of medics and the efforts of her colleagues to control the bleeding, Valeria could not be saved. She was rushed to the nearest hospital, where top specialists worked hard to save her life for several hours. Unfortunately, due to severe blood loss and damage to vital parts, she passed away on the operating table without regaining consciousness. When Valeria's family received the news, her parents, brothers, and sisters quickly went to the hospital. Unfortunately, by the time they arrived, had already passed away. Miguel was not only heartbroken but completely shattered, as he never had the chance to talk to and make amends with his dear daughter after their last small argument. He felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and was so distressed by the tragedy that he needed medical help to avoid a heart attack. Valeria was officially reported to have died while on duty during an operation aimed at capturing dangerous criminals. She was celebrated as a hero who sacrificed her life for the safety and well-being of others. Local media extensively covered the incident, with reporters highlighting her bravery and selflessness. The investigation into her death was conducted by experts from the Homicide and Major Crimes Division, where Valeria had previously served. They determined that she died from a gunshot wound to the abdomen, inflicted by an assailant in the direction of the suspect's vehicle that she and her colleagues were chasing. The situation initially seemed straightforward, as witnesses supported the narrative, making it appear that the case had been resolved. The only task left was to locate and hold the offenders accountable, who were still at large and possibly fleeing. Shortly after, the suspects were caught, attracting significant public attention. The criminals were identified as 19-year-old Miguel Alejandro Capon and his 17-year-old accomplice, whose name was kept confidential due to his age. Both individuals had prior convictions for lesser crimes. The then president of Chile, Miguel Juan Sebastián Pinera, issued an official statement assuring the public that the perpetrators would face justice according to the law. However, everything felt off. After the autopsy and necessary examinations, Valeria's body was returned to her family, who gave her a respectful burial in one of the city's cemeteries. Hundreds attended the funeral to pay their respects and offer condolences to her family. Jacqueline and Miguel described the entire experience as a nightmare. Among those who carried Valeria's coffin was her colleague Lionel, who seemed to grieve more than anyone else. However, other colleagues noted there had recently been some tension between them, to the point that Valeria hadn't invited Lionel to her birthday party. Shortly after the funeral, court proceedings began for the suspects who had been arrested the day after the incident and were currently in custody. Everyone believes that the person responsible for Valeria's death has been caught, and proving their guilt seems simple, especially when they begin to give confessions. However, it soon became apparent that the investigation had serious flaws from the beginning. Important details were missed, and crucial forensic evidence was minimized. The process was mismanaged, and higher officials tried to hide the identity of the actual person responsible for Valeria's death. About a month and a half after Valeria's death, the case took an unexpected turn. By the end of July, 2 employees were suspended for their alleged involvement in the incident that led to Valeria's death. On August 1st, the parents of Valeria were summoned to the prosecutor's office in the capital for an important meeting. They believed this meant that new evidence had come to light and that the detainees would finally face the punishment they deserved. Miguel and Jacqueline were devastated to hear that Valeria was killed by a bullet fired by a colleague. Prosecutor Juan Carlos Carrasco personally announced the news, expressing condolences and apologizing on behalf of the entire investigation team. Valeria's parents were in shock. They couldn't grasp how it could have occurred. The fatal shot that killed Valeria was fired from a gun by one of her colleagues. A ballistics examination conducted that day confirmed this, but the results were inaccurately reported. The bullet taken from the body Valeria was incorrectly categorized with different characteristics, such as shape, caliber, and weight. Additionally, the bullet had passed through the body rather than being extracted from it. There was a mix-up in the forensic reports regarding the entry and exit wounds. The bullet did not enter through the abdomen and exit through the back as stated. In fact, the shot was fired at her back. Several pages from the autopsy report were missing, and others had been obviously tampered with. Furthermore, the detainees involved in the trial, who supposedly admitted their guilt and were about to be sentenced, began to file complaints. They alleged that their confessions were obtained through torture and intimidation and that the firearm they had that night was not loaded. Valeria's story takes a sudden turn when she goes from a tragic hero who died on the job to a victim of betrayal, murdered by her own colleagues. In light of these new developments, the main suspects became Felipe Gilardo Era, the officer driving the police car, and Valeria's partner, Lionel Alejandro Contas Canales, who was in the back seat. Both were promptly suspended from their duties. On August 5th, it was revealed that the bullet that killed Valeria came from a service weapon. Later, an examination report showed that only Lionel had gunshot residue on his hands, making him the prime suspect. Interestingly, this information had not been disclosed earlier, as if it had been overlooked entirely. Several reports related to the ballistics examination and the pathologist's findings were mistakenly placed in an archive box, which was not properly reviewed. It remains unclear whether this was due to an accident, criminal negligence, or an intentional effort to hide important information. Now, the police officers involved in to capture the criminals that night are themselves regarded as suspects in the murder of Valeria. They, along with the previously arrested suspects, participated in a reenactment of the incident from that night. Felipe stated that from the driver's seat, he could only see Valeria, who was next to him in the front passenger seat and was the first to get out of the car. Lionel was sitting in the back and also exited, but the driver couldn't see his actions. Valeria had taken only a few steps when a shot rang out, she fell, and the suspect's car they were pursuing sped away. Lionel quickly ran to help Valeria. Lionel mentioned that he and Felipe exited the patrol car almost at the same time, but she had rushed forward as soon as the shot was fired. He firmly maintained that he did not shoot Valeria, and Felipe must witness and confirm this. He also confirmed that he was the first to reach Valeria and attempted to apply pressure to her wound. The testimonies from the witnesses varied, but the investigation revealed that Lionel was positioned behind Valeria at the time of the gunshot, and the bullet's path confirmed his location. Additionally, he was the only one with gunshot residue on his hands. New information from previously undisclosed reports and exam results led to potential motives for the crime. Lionel was arrested as the main suspect, while the previously detained young men were released with a non-exit agreement, since there were no charges against them. However, the reason for Lionel's actions is still uncertain. The primary theory was that the incident was a tragic accident. It is believed that Lionel, inexperienced officer, accidentally discharged his weapon while standing behind Valeria. In a state of panic, He tried to assist her, and when he returned his service weapon that day, he claimed he hadn't fired it. However, the truth soon emerged, and the young man's powerful relatives used their wealth and connections to try to cover up the incident. Because of that, the cleaned reports, missing documents, confusing evidence, and coerced testimonies from the detained individuals contributed. One theory, which Lionel himself partially confirmed, was that he was in love with Valeria and desperately wanted her attention. Unfortunately, his attempts only annoyed her, and she didn't even invite him to her birthday party, which the whole department attended. The shot in the back was his way of seeking revenge for this rejection. Another theory, suggested by Valeria's relatives, was that Valeria had uncovered something she shouldn't have, perhaps a corruption scheme or official misconduct. Being an honest and fair person, she would expose the culprit, leading to her being murdered to cover up the evidence. Young Lionel was chosen to carry out this act, with the promise that he would remain above suspicion. After Philippe was taken into custody, suspicions regarding Philippe remained. He was armed with the same type of service weapon, stood behind Valeria, and had the opportunity to fire the shot. Additionally, Philippe had a history of discipline for the unjustified use of a weapon during a criminal arrest, although no one was hurt in that incident. Because of this, he earned the nickname, the Reckless Shooter. Lionel's defense team quickly adopted this theory, claiming that Philippe accidentally shot Valeria. Since both Philippe and Lionel carried identical service weapons, it was possible that the guns were mixed up or intentionally swapped. Additionally, Philippe was inconsistent in his testimony, changing it multiple times. He later said he couldn't accurately recall the incident of that night because everything happened so quickly. However, no gunpowder residue was found on his hands, suggesting he was innocent. In response, Lionel claimed that gunpowder got on his hands while he was applying pressure to Valeria's wound, and that Era, who also assisted she, might have washed his hands before the examination. This explanation was not credible, as Valeria's blood stains were still on Philippe's hands, and it is impossible to wash away gunpowder without also removing blood. The trial and verdict have raised concerns about the competence of the investigation team, leaving Valeria's parents feeling desperate in their quest for justice. The new developments in the case led to public outrage and diminished trust in law enforcement. This story garnered attention not just from Chilean media but also from international outlets. As a result, several high-ranking officials were suspended or lost their jobs, including the head of the Homicide Investigation Department. Following a further investigation, Lionel was identified as the sole suspect, with all others cleared and designated as witnesses. In the spring of 2022, he was officially charged and remained in custody until the trial concluded. The hearings for the case began in March of the following year, and based on the evidence and witness testimonies, Lionel's guilt was clearly established. At first, the prosecution charged Lionel with intentionally murdering Valeria and aimed for the harshest possible sentence. But Lionel maintained that he would never hurt Valeria because he loved her. However, the bullet that killed her came from his gun. Lionel Alejandro Contas Canales was convicted of manslaughter and received a 12-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after 8 years. After the verdict was announced, the Vivano family voiced their disappointment, believing the sentence was too light. Meanwhile, Lionel and his legal team quickly filed several appeals. In February 2024, Valeria's family received a shocking update when the Supreme Court unexpectedly reduced the punishment for Lionel to just 540 days in prison, starting from the day he was arrested. This meant he effectively walked out of the courtroom a free man. In response, Valeria Vivano's family intends to sue the Chilean government, alleging that the judges acted corruptly. In a statement, Valeria's mother expressed her heartbreak, stating that the original 12-year sentence had felt too lenient, but the new decision felt like a mockery. She mentioned that it was as if she had lost her daughter all over again and that she no longer had faith in justice. Furthermore, she emphasized that their family was determined to hold the negligent Chilean government for what had happened. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sidney Luff. Sidney Irene Luff was born on August 21, 1993, in Broken Bow, Nebraska. She grew up in Arcadia with her parents, George and Susie Luff. In 2000, when she was in second grade, her family moved to Norfolk. Her mother, Susie, worked as a special education teacher, and her father, George, was a school principal. Sidney was an active child and enjoyed a happy childhood filled with a love of nature. She loved fishing, an activity her father often took her to do. During her school years, she participated in basketball and golf, and showed outstanding potential in both sports. However, she developed scoliosis, which affected the curvature of her spine and forced her to give up many of her favorite hobbies and sports. In 2011, after finishing high school, Sidney began working at a Menards store that focused on home improvement products. The Luff family was very attached, and when Sidney needed to move from Norfolk to Lincoln for her job, they all made an effort to stay in touch nearly every day and often gathered for dinner. Although Sidney lived on her own, she frequently returned to her parents' house. Recently, however, she had been dealing with depression and felt that her medications were not helping, but rather worsening her condition. Susie, concerned for her daughter, recommended a new doctor who prescribed different medications for her. During phone calls with her mom, Sidney expressed that she was starting to feel normal again, sounding quite optimistic. She was trying to make positive changes in her life and was searching for a new job. Working in a store wasn't her ultimate goal. She felt there was more out there for her. However, she was uncertain about her career path and what she truly wanted, which contributed to her feelings of depression. In November 2017, Sidney's mental health worsened, leading her to start taking antidepressants and occasionally smoke marijuana. Although her family and friends were very supportive, but she was looking for more than just companionship. She wanted love. Being young and modern, Sidney was interested in women, so she often searched for dates on social media. She used Tinder, an app that helps people connect for dating, to find friends and romantic interests. During that month, she matched with a girl named Audrey, who responded to her message. They began chatting and discovered they shared many interests, including gambling, hiking, and enjoying good food. After exchanging about 100 messages, Sidney and Audrey decided to meet in person on November 14. Sidney traveled to Audrey's house in Wilbur, and their first meeting was a success, leaving Sidney very happy. They enjoyed each other's company and agreed to meet again at Audrey's house on November 15. After finishing her shift at the store, Sidney went home to get ready. She cleaned up, styled her hair, and did her makeup before heading out. She took a selfie and posted it on Tinder with the caption, "Ready for date." Shortly after posting, she received a message from Audrey, who was waiting for her in the car. The following day, Sidney failed to arrive at work. Her family, who had noticed her recent happiness due to a new friend, became worried. When her co-workers reported her absence, they were surprised, as this behavior was uncharacteristic of their responsible daughter. Susie mentioned that Sidney had been struggling with anxiety and severe depression. Just days before she went missing, Sidney had spoken with her family about her worsening mental health, and they had recommended that she see a doctor to resume her antidepressant medication. That was the last time her family saw her. Sidney's parents visited her apartment and were shocked to find that Sidney had left her beloved cat, Mimsy, without food or water. This was very unusual for Sidney, as they knew how much she cared for her cat and never left it alone for long periods. Worried for her well-being, they reported Sidney missing to the police. The apartment was locked, and when the police conducted a welfare check, they found nothing unusual. However, the family insisted that something was wrong, and the police took their concerns seriously. On November 16, 2017, a 5 feet 7 inches blonde named Sydney was reported missing after not showing up for her shift at the Menards store located at 27th Street and Cornhusker Highway. She had a spinal condition that affected her walking, making her easily recognizable. When she went missing, she was wearing a white Columbia jacket and a cream-colored shirt. Her parents told the police that earlier that week, on Wednesday morning, Sydney had shared on Snapchat that she had gone on a date with a woman she met online the previous Tuesday night and planned to see her again that Wednesday evening. Sydney's car was found in northeast Lincoln, and the police are interviewing people and searching for any clues about her or her location. Her family has been handing out flyers suggesting she may have been abducted 40 miles southwest of Lincoln, where her cell phone last connected. The flyers also mentioned that there has been no activity in her bank account and that her phone was turned off the night she went missing. The flyers included a description of Sydney and highlighted her notable features, such as several tattoos, one on her arm that says, "Everything will be great someday," yin yang symbol beneath her elbow, and the word "believe" on her wrist. Anyone who has information about Sydney's location is encouraged to contact the police by phone. A massive search for Sydney was launched. Billboards were placed on freeways with her picture. A manhunt was also broadcast on television news. Sydney's mother, Susie, continued to assert that something had happened to her daughter after that date. To support her this thing, she shared a screenshot of a Snapchat post from Sydney that included her picture and the caption, "Ready for date." Sydney's friends also confirmed that she was going on a date with a woman named Audrey, whom she had met through Tinder. During the investigation, police examined Sydney's phone records and surveillance footage from her workplace. They quickly identified a person of interest. The last time Sydney's phone was used, it connected to a cell tower in the Wilbur neighborhood, likely close to Audrey's home. However, the police did not know who Audrey was. They started looking for a woman named Audrey, the last individual to see Sydney alive, but they faced challenges in locating her because no one knew her real name. Sydney's friend Brooklyn stepped in to help the police by searching for Audrey on Tinder. After downloading the app, she located Audrey and they exchanged phone numbers. This led the police to discover that Audrey's real name was 26-year-old Bailey Boswell. They also found out that Bailey lived near the cell tower where Sydney's phone was last connected. Additionally, it was revealed that Bailey shared her apartment with her partner, 52-year-old Aubrey Trail. Bailey and Aubrey are two individuals with contrasting backgrounds. Bailey Boswell was raised in a typical family in Lyons, Iowa. As a child, she was sociable and performed well academically, also finding success in basketball and running. However, after the death of her father, her life took a different turn. Following her high school graduation, Bailey fell into a troubling lifestyle that involved alcohol and drugs. It was during this time that she met Aubrey on a dating website. Aubrey Trail had a problematic history, facing several fraud charges, including writing bad checks and theft. He established a cult where he referred to himself as Vampire Daddy and paid women $200 a week to adhere to his strange rules. When Sydney disappeared, Aubrey and Bailey were court-ordered to pay over $40,000 due to their fraud cases, and they had multiple misdemeanors. Despite this, the couple was able to evade the authorities. On November 19, 2017, after a warrant was issued, police conducted a search of Bailey in Aubrey's home. During the search, they found that some walls had been scrubbed with bleach. A neighbor confirmed this, stating they had noticed a strong smell of bleach 2 days earlier. After that, the police made more efforts to find the suspects. While evading capture, Bailey and Aubrey posted videos on Facebook denying any involvement in Sydney's disappearance and expressing their hope for her safe return. Bailey mentioned that she had gone on 2 dates with Sydney but had dropped her off at a friend's house, after which she never heard from Sydney again. Bailey added that she just wanted Sydney's family to know that she was really sorry, but she had nothing to do with it. She hoped that Sydney would be found very soon, as Sydney was a lovely, amazing girl. After several days, the police tracked down Bailey Boswell and Aubrey Trail at a hotel in Branson, Missouri. They were arrested weeks after Sydney was reported missing. Through a detailed analysis of phone records and Bailey's location history, investigators found Sydney's remains, which had been dismembered into 14 pieces. 13 of these body parts were discovered in black plastic garbage bags in ditches in Clay County, with some of her part, such as her heart, missing. The situation was horrific. In total, 16 crime scenes were connected to Sydney's remains or her personal belongings, including her car keys, driver's license, and phone case, which were found along the highway. These locations were consistent with the suspects' movements, Bailey and Aubrey. Forensic experts performed autopsies on the 13 body parts that were found. They found abrasions on Sydney's wrists, a bump on her head, torn earlobes, and various bruises, contusions on her back. These injuries suggested that Sydney had struggled to defend herself. The tragic finding devastated not only Sydney's family and friends but also the entire community of Nebraska. On December 11, 2017, the Luff family held a private funeral for Sydney at her lifelong Lutheran church. Bailey and Aubrey faced charges of first-degree murder, improper disposal of human remains, and conspiracy to commit a felony. Bailey pleaded not guilty to all charges, while Aubrey pleaded not guilty to felony murder and conspiracy but admitted guilt regarding the improper disposal of human remains. Aubrey's testimonies were inconsistent. Each time he spoke, he appeared increasingly confused, altering his statements and introducing new elements and characters into the story. After his arrest, Aubrey spoke to the police about the cult that he and Bailey belonged to. He discussed witchcraft and claimed that he was a vampire capable of flying. Aubrey presented himself as the cult leader and insisted that there were witches in the group who needed to kill another woman to gain powers. During one of Aubrey's early court hearings, he confessed to killing Sydney but insisted it was an accident. Aubrey explained that he paid Sydney $5,000 to fulfill a fantasy with 2 other women. Sydney agreed to this, but she tragically died during the encounter when he accidentally strangled her with a cord. Aubrey admitted to dismembering the body Sydney as part of a ritual tied to his religious beliefs. He said he needed to drain her blood to free her soul for the gods in a sacred location and arranged her body parts to aid in her reincarnation. However, this account was proven to be false. Surveillance footage from November 14 captured Bailey and Aubrey checking into a hotel in Lincoln, close to Sydney's residence. The following day, November 15, they went to a home improvement store, where they were seen purchasing a disturbing selection of tools, a hacksaw, bleach, a folding saw, a utility knife, and bags intended for Sydney's remains. On November 15 at 12:01 p.m., a surveillance camera recorded Sydney and Aubrey crossing paths at the Menard store during business hours. At that moment, Sydney did not know who Aubrey was or how their lives would become intertwined in a tragic way. On June 11, 2018, the first court hearing took place regarding the murder and improper burial of Sydney's remains. The court ordered separate trials for the defendants, Bailey and Aubrey, although the charges against them were essentially the same. The trials were held in Lexington because the attorneys argued that Bailey and Aubrey would not receive a fair trial in Wilbur due to the extensive media coverage of the case. The prosecution argued that Sydney was murdered through strangulation in a premeditated attack. Aubrey and Bailey were identified as the leaders of a group that recruited young women into intimate activities. To find these women, Bailey used Tinder. During the trial, the jury heard from 3 other women who had previously been in relationships with Aubrey and Bailey, and they shared that they also met these men on Tinder. All of these women had been involved with Bailey and had engaged in intimate activities with both Bailey and Aubrey. One woman testified that she traveled with Aubrey and was given a weekly allowance of $200. She claimed he invited her to join his cult, which he referred to as involving witches. To join, he told her she would need to torture and kill someone. She also mentioned that Bailey was called the Witch Queen. Another woman added that Bailey often talked about breaking her fingers and expressed a desire to dismember bodies. All three women emphasized that both Bailey and Aubrey actively participated in these discussions about torture and criminal acts. It is surprising that in today's world, some people still believe in the terrifying concept of exorcism and try to persuade others of its validity. The prosecution reviewed the investigation and the evidence gathered to piece together what happened on the tragic evening of November 15, 2017. Sydney was preparing for a date with a woman she had recently met through Tinder. Bailey picked Sydney up from her apartment, and they started driving in Bailey's car. Eventually, they arrived at Bailey's house, where Sydney was drawn into the apartment. As soon as she entered, Bailey and Aubrey attacked her and strangled her with an extension cord on the living room floor. Bailey and Aubrey then cleaned the apartment thoroughly, an action the prosecution claimed was planned in advance. They subsequently dismembered Sydney and disposed of her remains in Clay County. The next day, on November 16, the court heard from their landlord, Jennifer Cull. She testified that when she drove into the garage, she noticed a strong smell of chlorine, which became more intense when she entered the house. The medical examiner concluded that Sydney's death was a homicide caused by asphyxiation. Toxicology reports revealed that Sydney had antidepressants in her system. The court discovered that, in addition to the missing parts, Sydney's upper left arm, specifically the section above the elbow and below the shoulder, was also unaccounted for. Prosecutors have recommended the death penalty for the two suspects. They have also said they will review the case if the verdict is deemed unfair. Meanwhile, Aubrey again denied any involvement in occult activities and only admitted to improperly burying the remains. During his trial, he exclaimed that Bailey was not involved in Sydney's death, shouting, "Bailey is innocent, damn you all." Then, he attempted to end his life by slashing his throat 3 times with a razor blade. However, he survived and was placed in custody until he fully recovered. Aubrey did not attend court for several weeks after that. The next time he appeared was during the defense phase, specifically when he was scheduled to testify. When he entered the courtroom, he smirked and told the judge, "He will be good." It's uncommon for defendants to testify in their own trials, as defense attorneys often advise against it. This is because testifying can lead to complications during cross-examination. Some defendants may reveal too much information, struggle to answer questions clearly, or become confrontational with attorneys, which can negatively influence jurors. However, in Aubrey's case, his situation was different since he had many interactions with the police following his arrest. Aubrey had initially shared his account of incident with the police, but during the trial, he wanted to change his story. He chose to skip most of the trial and only attended the final hearing, where his noticeable scars were evident. When he testified in his defense, Aubrey shocked his attorneys by admitting that he had previously lied to both the authorities and his legal team regarding the death of Sydney. In his testimony, he confessed that he met Sydney in March 2017 and paid her to take part in his illegal activities because she was in need of money. He claimed they lost contact, but in November 2017, he reached out to Sydney again. She needed money, and Aubrey explained that this was the reason he was at Menards that day. On November 15, Aubrey offered to pay Sydney $55,000 to she join his antiques gang. Later that night, Aubrey, Bailey, and Sydney became intimate, but unfortunately, Sydney accidentally choked to death due to an extension cord used during their activities. Aubrey stated that he didn't know if Sydney had a seizure or something. But that was when she stopped breathing. In court, he clarified that there was no ritual involved in dismembering Sydney's body and that claims about witches, vampires, and blood-sucking were false. Aubrey admitted that he had only dismembered Sydney because he couldn't fit her body in the car. Aubrey stated that he panicked and discarded Sydney's body in a field in Clay County at dawn on November 16. When questioned about why he didn't seek help if Sydney's death was accidental, he claimed that no one would believe him. Aubrey confessed to disposing of Sydney's body but insisted that her death was accidental, occurring while they were playing with an extension cord. During Bailey's trial, she did not admit to any wrongdoing. In fact, her lawyers argued that she was also a victim of Aubrey. Her attorney told the court that when she met Aubrey, she was a vulnerable young woman living alone and working as a waitress in Princeton, Missouri. The defense claimed that Bailey was not involved in Sydney's death or the handling of her remains. But this turned out to be untrue. Bailey's cell phone, which she used to access her Tinder account, was located near where Sydney's body parts were discovered. Through a thorough examination of Bailey's phone and location data, police were able to locate all of Sydney's remains. The court also found out that Bailey was the one who reached out to Sydney and set up a meeting. Bailey drove to Sydney's to pick her up on the evening of November 15th. The prosecution informed the court that Bailey found pleasure in discussing cruelty and enjoyed conversations about torture with Aubrey. Evidence presented during the trial indicated that a crime had been planned. On the day of Sydney's murder, Aubrey and Bailey were together at a store where they purchased tools such as a hacksaw, scissors, and a box cutter from Home Depot. Around noon that day, Bailey sent Sydney a text asking how her day was going. Phone records and surveillance footage confirmed that Bailey was in the Menards parking lot with Aubrey when she sent this message on Tinder. Despite working at Menards, but it seems that Sydney did not realize Bailey was there. A few hours later, Bailey sent Sydney a message on Tinder, said that her was at her apartment and would pick Sydney up soon. However, phone records reveal that instead of going on a date, they went to the apartment where Bailey and Aubrey lived. Bailey's attorney, Todd Lancaster, argued that the evidence indicated Bailey had bought bleach in garbage bags for the purpose of disposing of Sydney's body. This could result in charges of aiding and abetting the improper disposal of human remains. On November 8, 2021, Bailey Boswell was sentenced to life in prison. The Love family has been searching for justice for 3 years, grieving the loss of their beloved daughter, Sydney. They hoped for a judgment that would bring them some peace. On July 11, 2019, a jury took less than 3 hours to find Aubrey Trail guilty of planning a murder and improperly disposing of human remains. The 3 judges described his actions as cold and calculated. In the second part of the trial, which determined his punishment, the county prosecutors fulfilled their commitment and secured the death penalty for Aubrey Trail. Consequently, he was executed by lethal injection on June 9, 2021.